Is that off one of those two base computers, Katie?
Here, wait, let's try this. Try it one more time. Nothing?
You probably got to speak. I don't know if it'll pick up the bump.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, testing.
There we go.
There we go.
Is that better?
Mama, don't let you be.
Test 1, 2. There we go. Okay. All right. So I will call the City Commission for Oregon City to order for Wednesday, February 7th, 2018. Call roll, please.
Absolutely. Commissioner Shaw.
Here.
Commissioner Mengelberg. Here. Commissioner Ide. Here. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Mayor Holliday.
Here. So after this session, we will have an executive session of the Oregon City Commission pursuant to ORS 192.660, paragraph 2H, to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. We do not anticipate we will have to come back into regular session to make a decision in public. If you please stand, join me in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm making an executive decision, and we're going to move up the general business 7A 18-085, resolution 18-04, Willamette Falls Riverwalk Master Plan Adoption, Mr. Phil Lewis.
Well, do we want to do citizen?
Number 3.
Oh, you want me to do citizen comment first?
Sure. Why don't we do you want to do the Planning Commission update, citizen comment, and then we could have that right before the public hearing, and then roll into the.
Well, that isn't what you said, but okay. So we'll move back onto the agenda. 3A 18-084, Planning Commission annual update. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I am pleased to announce our chair of our Planning Commission, Denise McGriff, and our vice chair, Paul Espy.
Good evening, Commissioners. We're very pleased to be here today to give you an update on the overview of our activities for 2017. I'm going to start, and Paul will do the middle, and then I'll wrap up. So as you know, we were operating a little bit under the number 7 last year for a while, and we welcomed Commissioner Vern Johnson to our complement, bringing us to 7. And I'm still the only woman on there, so I've got 5 great guys to work with, 6 great guys, and they're really terrific. We have a good camaraderie, and we have a great deal of discussion. As you know, we've reviewed a range of legislative and judicial projects and applications, and our meetings have ranged from sometimes 1 to 2 participants to 0 participants to overflowing rooms. And we've been very conscientious to make sure that everyone who attends our meetings has an opportunity to be heard. So some of our goals for the current biennium are?
Okay. We'd like to continue coordinating ongoing work sessions with our partners, such as the Citizen Involvement Council, the Historic Review Board, and the Oregon City School District. And then we'd like to amend the Natural Resources Overlay to include water features in the Kaniman National Register District, and then work to provide input with the City Commission on funding for needed and current and future planning work. You want me to keep going?
Sure.
Okay. Future goals for the 2019-2021 period would be to create food cart regulations of some sort, recommending a creation of a citywide facilities plan. We'd like to talk about our annexation policy a little bit more. A little bit more in-depth and comprehensive look at service availability and a overall look at the comprehensive plan and zoning designations. And that would be a part of, hopefully, the comprehensive plan review and update. We'd maybe look at some of that stuff.
Yeah, we're very cognizant of the fact that we have constrained budgets, and we want to make sure that we are not overburdening our staff with all of our fantastic ideas. But we want to make sure that some of the things that we feel need to be updated, particularly our comp plan, or not necessarily an update, but just go through a review. And Commissioner Mahoney is probably the one leading the charge on that project, and we all agree with him. As you know, we're currently working on projects as a commission or as members of an advisory committee. We're taking up your request, which actually was our request to you, to your request back to us, to back to you. Lot averaging review, which is coming up. A couple of us sit on the Alternative Mobility Standards Review and Recommendation Committee. I'm serving as a representative from the Planning Commission on the Equitable Housing Review. And then we're going to finish, hopefully, at this next meeting, the Kenema McLaughlin Trail Project. We had quite a bit of robust citizen involvement there, and I want to commend staff on their work on that particular project. I think it's important for you to know that although we have our staff, we appreciate our staff, we sometimes question our staff, which we all should. We appreciate the work and their devotion to the work that we do together. It's really important to us that we all act as a team, and we have been for the last year, and I think that's due in part to Laura's leadership. I want to particularly commend Kelly Reed, Christina, Robertson Gardner. I always get Daniela's name incorrect because I can't pronounce it. So you'll have to help me out on that.
Diliana Vasilieva?
Yes, Diliana Vasilieva, and particularly Pete Walter. He's had a couple of really rough projects. He's now doing equitable housing, but as you know, he had to go through the marijuana regulations. And I think he needs to get a gold star for that, and I think his gold star is the fact that he's on vacation. So we are looking forward to a very busy 2018, and we are working hard on behalf of our citizens. I do want you to know that all of us regularly receive feedback informally by our citizens. My shopping trips to Fred Meyer have now been lengthened quite a bit because I seem to run into everyone there, as I'm sure you all do, or wherever we shop. And people want to stop and talk to you about what's going on, or they have a concern. I appreciate the fact that the Planning Commission has regularly received feedback from our community about our meetings. We are very open to input from our citizens. We feel that everyone needs to be treated with respect, regardless to their opinion. Whether we agree with them or not, that's not our job to disagree or agree, but it's our job to sit there and to make them feel like we are hearing them, that they are understood, and that we have taken what they've said into consideration. And civility is really kind of the watchword for our meetings. You know, after all, the community is who we are doing our work for, and it's who we represent. I want you to know personally that I feel it is a privilege and an honor, regardless of the workload that the Planning Commission has, and which is considerable, to serve. And I appreciate the fact that the community has given me this opportunity, and I want to thank the citizens of the City of Oregon City for the opportunity to serve them. They've given me so much, and I feel it's important for me to give back to them, and this is one of the ways that I can do that. Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about our work plan for next year. You want to wrap up anything as well?
I need about 30 seconds. This is from the oath of the Athenian city-state. And it's real quick. It's great though. We will ever strive for the ideals and sacred things of the city, both alone and in many. We will unceasingly seek to quicken the sense of the public duty. We will revere and obey the city's laws. We will transmit the city not only not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us.
We feel
And those are our words to live by when we serve.
That's what we feel. So, thank you, unless you have any questions.
Well, I just want to thank all of the members for the work you're doing. You know, you guys kind of do all the heavy lifting for us. And
That's why I work out at the gym.
But we appreciate it. I know we've had a couple of challenges this year, but we've all come out as friends and neighbors, and that's what we do. So I appreciate all your efforts. So
Thank you, Brian.
I'd like to echo that sentiment. And I want to say the Planning Commission, their work is so critical, and I value the expertise on that commission, specifically your own, Ms. McGriff, and yourself, Mr. Espy, and Bob Mahoney and others. I mean, I personally rely on your insights. I watch your meetings, and sometimes I feel these are much easier than your own meetings. And I want to compliment you, Denise, particularly on your inviting mannerisms to bring people forward. everyone is treated with respect, and there's never a dismissive attitude towards opinions that may or may not be shared by others. So
Thank you.
congratulations on a job well done.
We appreciate it. We're trying really hard on your behalf.
We know.
I also echo the comments that have been made, and I just wanted to express my appreciation too for all the hours and hours of time that you spend looking at things from a technical perspective, and how you have to make those really tough decisions sometimes. You know, some of those that don't often come to the City Commission, and so I just my hats off to you, and I just appreciate all the time that you put in.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, well, we plan to work even harder next year for you. So that's our job.
In interest of brevity, I echo all of the sentiments of my fellow commissioners and appreciate your good work.
I do as well, and as I've said on numerous occasions, the Planning Commission is the one place that I would never wish to be sent to serve. So,
Somebody's got to do it.
so we appreciate all the hard work, and thank you for your work in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We're happy to be here today.
Thank you.
So now we're up to citizen comments, and are these all in citizen comment now?
Yes.
So I'm just going to go in the order they're on my screen. William Gifford and Patrick Rechtenwald.
Should I wait for Patrick?
Yeah,
Nick, come on up.
come up and have a seat.
Mr. Gifford.
Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. I'm sure that the Commission is well aware of the unique organization of governmental organization in Oregon, Metro, that we have a distinct and important relationship with at many levels. I think you're also aware that there's an election coming up for replacement of a couple of members, but one particularly is in our district. Our councilor, Carlotta Collette, whom you all know, is retiring, and we have an opportunity to have another councilor, and we have a candidate who is very near and dear to Oregon City, but has a much broader perspective about the entire Clackamas County area. Carol Pauley, and tomorrow night is going to be her kickoff party for her campaign, which is going to be at the Abernathy Center at 5 o'clock. And I'm just encouraging all of you and anyone who's listening, whether on TV or recorded or in the audience tonight, if you would all like to come down and wish Carol and learn more about her. And that's going to be tomorrow night at 5 o'clock at the Abernathy Center.
And bring the checkbook.
And if you'd like to bring a checkbook, that would be nice too.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Rechtenwald.
You're up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I come before you today as a representative of a large group of concerned
Sir,
citizens.
before you start, if you could give me your name and city
I'm
of
sorry.
residence for the record,
Patrick
please.
Rechtenwald, Oregon City.
Okay.
A few days ago, our neighborhood became aware of plans to establish a halfway house at 523 Roosevelt Street. The organization, Free on the Outside, has plans to convert a single-family dwelling into a residential facility. From what we know, they plan on having 10 beds available to house recently released inmates in an attempt to teach them how to reintegrate into society. They've also stated that they plan to use 30 to 40% of their beds to house sex offenders. It's our understanding that nothing has been submitted to the City of Oregon City or to Clackamas County regarding the establishment of a halfway house at 523 Roosevelt Street. By all appearances, Free on the Outside is attempting to become an unlicensed, unqualified halfway house. In an attempt to discover the facts, we, the citizens, have been in contact with several individuals at the City of Oregon City. Assistant Planner Diliana Vasileva stated that they were unaware of any plans to establish a halfway house at 523 Roosevelt Street until it was brought to their attention recently by some concerned citizens. She stated she wasn't aware if they even needed to be made aware of this halfway house and cited City Code 17.12.020 subsection H, which defines a residential home and adopts Oregon Revised Statute 443.400. ORS 443.400 outlines licensing procedures for a residential facility and by definition requires licensing in every single case. ORS 443.400 by definition is meant to care for the mentally unstable and drug-addicted individuals, not recently released inmates. As indicated, and also stated previously, Free on the Outside plans to offer beds to recently released inmates. And this type of dwelling or business structure falls under the correct definition of ORS 169690, which is meant specifically for the establishment of halfway houses in residential facilities. This requires very thorough vetting before ground can be broken on any proposed project. ORS 169690.690, and all subsections are relevant to what Free on the Outside is attempting to establish at 523 Roosevelt Street. Yesterday, at the property, 2 new mailboxes were placed outside the residence, one labeled A and the other labeled B. This has clearly been converted into a multi-family type dwelling without permits or proper zoning. To date, there have been no conditional use or variance permits issued by the city or county. We understand that this has been assigned to building codes for investigation. We're asking for a full risk analysis to be performed on the area surrounding 523 Roosevelt Street and for the city to red tag the project immediately. Excessive delay in this matter may not be in the public interest and it's not good for surrounding property owners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And let me just say, I was briefed just a little bit on this today. Until we get something that comes into planning or building, there's really not a whole lot the city can do. Certainly, I assume that somebody from building can go by and take a look.
I can hop in there. Sorry, I'm so loud. So we did receive some code enforcement complaints. We did speak to a variety of concerned citizens, both in person and over the phone. So we had a code enforcement complaint logged into the system on Monday morning. And since then, we've done a lot of work. We have coordinated with various departments, such as planning and building and our police department as well. And we've sent out a letter to look at the conditional use aspect, which is what one of the references. We also have a separate code enforcement complaint about building permits. So we are working on that as well. And so rest assured, we are coordinating and looking into this matter.
All right, thank you. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to maybe throw something in too.
Sure.
Sure, go ahead.
I want everybody who's here to know that we had a lot of discussion about this at a Tuesday meeting. Okay. that we have regularly. How you feel in your neighborhood is extremely important to all of us. The thing that a lot of times these situations have come up before, and sometimes people qualify in every way to be in a neighborhood, and there's nothing we can do just because of what the law looks like. But there are some things that I think that maybe we can help with too, just in communication about topics like sex offenders and what they mean, what a sex offender is, what a predatory sex offender is. I'm not saying it's going to make you feel great, but it might at least ease some concerns. I don't know. But our office, my office, if you get a hold of anybody at my agency, we would be happy to sit down with anybody in your neighborhood. I drove by this house today, and we can answer any questions like that, and we'll keep information going to you if there's a point person, because we certainly don't want you scared, but we also have to follow we have to follow Oregon state law as it pertains to sex offenders, but also all of our city codes.
Okay. And I do want to point out that I work for a state agency that requires licensing for construction contract work. And so I opened a field investigation into the construction that was going on at the home. And I had a field investigator sit on the house yesterday, and she was able to cite individuals for working without a license who are completely unqualified to be there.
I think I'm going to stop you right there, because I think you should probably talk to someone about that particular action.
Okay, can you explain why?
This isn't the venue.
No, I can't explain why, but I think you better talk to your
Okay.
boss before you continue to do things like that.
Just so that you know, I did. I have a duty, because I work for this agency, to report any unlicensed construction
Okay, all right.
activity. And
Thanks,
so
sir.
I'm within my,
We'll be on it.
okay.
Okay, next up, Jennifer Ostrick and Kent Ziegler.
Oh, thank you.
So just as a reminder, citizen comments are 3 minutes, and I typically stick close to that. So, Ms. Ostrick?
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Ostrick, and I live in Oregon City. And I am here due to the neighborhood concern on Roosevelt Street. I understand, and I've heard everything you guys have said, and I am not going to stick to my script. I will be quite under 3 minutes then.
Okay.
I just want to point out that I appreciate what a sex offender and what a predatory sex offender look like. I have spent 3.5 years working with a criminally mentally ill. With that, I know who these people are. And I think that it's completely appropriate to allow everyone to have a second chance. And as I was told by the Oregon City Police, they all need a place to live. I agree with that statement. I do not believe that that place should be on a street that has 17 children, all under the age of 15. 6 of these children have disabilities. 10 of these children are under the age of 9. And furthermore, 13 of these children take the bus every single day. I, as a single parent, have to believe that my children will make it safely to and from the bus. I have to believe that as a nurse, making sure that I am doing my due diligence to take care of those in the hospital and those that are criminally mentally ill that find themselves in my care are receiving that care, but are not being, that my children not being preyed on as I am working on those people. So I hope that you truly understand what we're here for. This room is filled with at least half of my residents that live with me. We are here because we are concerned, and we need every single one of you to be concerned as well. Thank you.
So let me just reiterate, I guarantee you that every one of us sitting up here shares the same concerns that you do, and the city planning and building and the other police department, we will ensure that if this facility is coming here, that they have to follow all of the applicable rules, all the applicable codes, all those things. And if they don't, it won't happen. Unfortunately, there are some situations where by federal law, we can't stop it from happening. And I don't know if this is one of those situations or not, but there are situations, I've had a situation like that when I was on the city commission the first time. So we just have to be clear that there can be times when there's nothing we can do except for the building code and planning and zoning. Mr. Ziegler.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you tonight. Obviously, I know many of you personally from you attending our Oregon City Business Alliance forums, and we appreciate that. I'd like to thank City Manager Tony Conkle for being our speaker last month. We had a record attendance for a January presentation by City Manager, and I don't know what else to say, but your message was well received, so we appreciate that. I'm wearing a lot of hats tonight. I'm on the board for Rediscover the Falls, and I know tonight we're asking for adoption of the master plan for the Riverwalk. Obviously, it's a treasure, it's a jewel, it's unique to Oregon City, and so I just totally support all of the efforts that the Willamette Falls Legacy Project team is doing, as well as Rediscover the Falls. And so I strongly ask that you go along with their requests in that adoption. I also believe in jobs. As president of the Oregon City Business Alliance again this year, I think that Dan Fowler's Hotel Hampton Inn Suites is a tremendous jewel in the crowd.
This is for items not on the agenda.
So the main reason why I'm here, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate you cutting me off. I got today's Oregon City News. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read it. Okay? I was shocked. I was literally shocked. And let me tell you why. There's an article titled "Proposed Annexation is Dangerous and Short-Sighted" by a planning commissioner named Tom Guile. Your planning commissioner went on to say that this development, this current...
Hang on.
Excuse me a second. We have an application pending for this.
Yes.
And I appreciate that you brought this issue here, but the appropriate place is for you to bring it to the planning commission at the meeting a week from Wednesday, or a week from today, yesterday?
No, it's
On Monday.
Monday, excuse me. And we will put that article in the record, and we will handle it in due course. But the city commission is going to be reviewing this application, and so I prefer not to talk about this right now. Because
I
it
can
matters
appreciate
before the
your
planning commission.
concerns, but I'm also concerned as promoting business and economic development in Oregon City as president of the Oregon City Business Alliance and as a citizen, that there are outright lies in this article that need to be corrected.
I'm going to stop you here. Okay. So I got to take the advice of my attorney.
That's fine.
All right. And you'll have plenty of venues to vent and to say your piece as far as this, as the process goes forward.
And in closing, I've learned when I need to cut off. We are very excited, as William Gifford shared, to have Carol Pauley running for the Metro position that Carlotta Collette is vacating. Notice how I can move pretty quickly here?
You got 20 seconds left.
So the Oregon City Business Alliance is sponsoring her event tomorrow night at the Abernathy Center from 5 to 8. So we would be more than happy to see everyone here in the audience come to support her, encourage her in her campaign. I think she'd be an excellent choice to fill that position.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
thank you for my
Ziegler.
time.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I'm going to say this to Jennifer and the other gentleman that came up. Do not think that we're glossing over this 523 Roosevelt thing. I'm sure that we are going to look at it in every way possible, at every applicable law. The first gentleman cited a number of ORSs. I'm certain we'll look at it from building codes, ORSs, and I'm confident in our city manager that he'll direct that effort. And we don't sit here thinking, hey, that's your neighborhood, this is our town, and we value what you have to say, and we feel what you feel. But we also have to abide by laws, but give us a moment to investigate this and gather some good information. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright, do you have something?
Nope.
Okay. So now we're going to move the agenda around a little bit. I'm going to move up 7A 18-085, Resolution 1018-04, Willamette Falls Riverwalk Master Plan Adoption, Mr. Phil Lewis. And of course there's a PowerPoint.
It's a Lewis characteristic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. We're here today to present the Willamette Falls Riverwalk Master Plan. With me today is Alex Gilbertson, and let her introduce herself.
Good evening. My name is Alex Gilbertson, and I am a senior planner, regional planner with Metro, the project manager for the Willamette Falls Riverwalk.
And she's going to walk us through the Riverwalk Master Plan, and then I'm going to speak briefly on how it impacts Oregon City.
Thank you, Phil. We're excited to share the 2-year journey that has led us to the master plan for the Willamette Falls Riverwalk. And during that time, we got to know the site and the community, and we believe this design integrates both into a vision for the future. With your approval tonight of the master plan, it is an important step in making the community's vision a reality. As you're aware, upon closure of the mill, 4 agencies, Oregon City, Clackamas County, Metro, and the state of Oregon, all came together as the Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners to secure public access to the falls. In 2012, Oregon City, with the other 3 partners, identified 4 core values in order to bring the Willamette Falls Legacy Project to life. And these values are used as a guidepost or a framework for decision making, and will be used in that same capacity throughout the project as decisions are implemented. And then in 2014, the Framework Master Plan, which you see on the screen today, was created in order to guide future development of the site. The Willamette Falls Riverwalk site is the 22-acre former Blue Heron Paper Mill property in downtown Oregon City via an easement that was donated by the private property owner, which covers the entire site. And then PGE owns the dam, which you see in yellow, and they have granted an easement option in order to allow public access onto the dam. From the winter of 2015 to present, project staff have been involved with the Riverwalk planning, design, and community engagement. And the white boxes on the top with the orange outline, those all indicate some major planning milestones that have occurred throughout the process. And we held 5 large-scale community events as well as an online community check-in. In addition to that, numerous presentations and facilitated conversations were held with the community, as well as we had tours of the site that we offered, and we still actually offer those today. In addition to the public events, the project's outreach also included conversations with agencies and stakeholders to talk about the complexities and science of the site. We met with focus groups, state representatives, as well as the 5 tribes who have past and present ties to the falls. And throughout those conversations, there have been several consistent themes. We heard that people desire interactions with nature and views of the falls, materials that respect the existing site character, a central gathering space that supports a variety of community uses, covered areas for 4-season shade and rain protection. And we also heard that people desire interpretive information about the site's history and cultural ties. We also learned that there are many factors that need to be balanced within the design as we look at phasing in order to move the project forward. And these could range from things like conservation priorities, site accessibility, future redevelopment plans, or cultural considerations, for example. And project staff heard many ideas from the public, which informed and guided the design of the Riverwalk. Key uses that you see on the screen here guided specifically the public access portion of the Riverwalk and include elements such as falls viewing or tribal access, PGE dam operations, or on the bottom, economic redevelopment. And throughout the documentation of this 2-year process, project staff have engaged with thousands of Oregonians. We closed the process with a formal public comment period for review of the draft master plan. We had considered and incorporated requests for activities that would be supported by the Riverwalk and have worked hard to create space for future amenities and economic opportunities that the community values. We are thankful to the groups and individuals that provided comments related to the master plan and remain committed to delivering the project that reflects all of the values of Oregon City, the Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners, and the community. And now I'm going to turn it over to Phil, and he's going to share a little bit about the importance of this project on Oregon City.
Thank you. So as you're aware, when the Blue Heron Paper Company closed, Oregon City was faced with 22 acres of vacant industrial waterfront property next to its historic downtown. The addition of the Willamette Falls Riverwalk will create a regional park in historic downtown Oregon City and expand recreational opportunities to the greater metropolitan area. The image on the screen that you're viewing is a rendering of the public yard. It's a broad plaza with expansive views towards the falls and PGE Dam to the south. The yard and adjacent structures provide a highly flexible public space where people can mingle and congregate in a new civic heart for Oregon City. The Oregon City Parks and Recreation Master Plan and Master Plan Update identifies goals which are met through the realization of the Riverwalk. These goals include acquiring parkland for a growing community, improving efficiencies and level of service through strategic partnerships, and improving connectivity through trail development. Sustainability is also recognized by Oregon City Parks Department as a top priority. This is achieved through protecting natural resources, public resource stewardship, cultural resources, and fostering economic development. The Willamette Falls Riverwalk, as envisioned, will connect the people of Oregon City to Willamette Falls and will reconnect residents, businesses, and visitors alike with the rich history of the area.
Thanks, Phil. And this site is among the most historic places in Oregon. The layers of history on the former Blue Heron property can provide a much deeper understanding of the power of this place. And while it may not be apparent with the images that you just saw on the screen, I wanted to point out that historic and cultural interpretation, which is one of our 4 core values, that is embedded into the design and will be augmented into each phase of the project. What you see up here on the screen are the covers of 2 significant bodies of work that are included as appendices to the master plan document. They are the Cultural Landscape Report on the left and the Interpretive Framework Plan on the right. The Cultural Landscape Report is a place-based document, research document that takes all of the information, the public realm information, and ties it to a place, focusing on how it has changed over time. This document is in draft form, and it will remain in draft form until it becomes refined when we move into the federal Section 106 permitting process. Using the CLR, the Cultural Landscape Report, as a resource, the Interpretive Framework Plan, you can kind of think of it as a guide or a roadmap for how we would create an interpretive experience at the Riverwalk. Like the CLR, this also is a living document and will continue to change and refine as new phases, each phase of the Riverwalk is developed and realized. And the overall Riverwalk design itself is an aspirational plan that anticipates future funding. It is anticipated that the design of the Riverwalk will be built as funding becomes available. Goals for Phase 1 include providing a prominent view of the falls, safe and secure interim access, habitat restoration, and building demolition that will prepare the site for future phases. Everything that you see in red, the red outlines, indicate buildings to be demolished to reduce barriers for redevelopment. The area that you see outlined in blue is the area of the Phase 1 project boundary where we would be providing access to the falls. And that is encompassed in the Mill H and Boiler Plant complex. During design and engineering, we'll be looking at interim access and will finalize an accessible alignment to view the falls. Rediscover the Falls is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was established in 2016, and they serve as our fundraising and fundraising arm of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. They're a group of advocates and business people and community leaders who all have the same vision of returning Willamette Falls to the public in a way that honors historic and cultural significance, repairs and conserves the natural habitat, and strengthens the regional economy. And with the fundraising help from Rediscover the Falls, we have approximately $19 million available to fully fund the first phase of construction for the Riverwalk. This effort represents the responsible expenditure of funds contemplated in the project partners' intergovernmental agreement. We released the draft master plan for public comment following a Metro Council work session in November. Project staff gave this presentation to the project partners, and as you recall, we were here giving a presentation at a City Commission work session. At the work session in December, we received full support from the Commission. We gave a presentation to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee last month and received their vote of support as well. And then on January 4th, Metro Council adopted this master plan by resolution. As I mentioned earlier, approval of this plan tonight is an important step to move the project forward. We will continue to make refinements to the plan to advance the design following the adoption of this plan. Concluding this 2-year process, staff recommends the adoption of Resolution 18-04 for purposes of approving the Willamette Falls Riverwalk Master Plan. Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Questions? I do want to recognize a few people in the room. We have Brian Moore, the project manager from Metro. Mayor Alice Norris back there, and she's our president of Rediscover the Falls, is that right? Yes. And County Commissioner Martha Schrader. So if nobody has any questions and you guys are done.
It is my understanding we have some folks here for public comment as well.
I hadn't gotten back to the agenda yet. So.
Okay.
Okay. I gotta move my thing here. In order to get to the right people, I have to move something on my screen. Okay, so Mayor Alice Norris and Commissioner Schrader. And I forgot to mention MG Devereaux from Oregon State Parks in the back there too.
After you, Mayor.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm honored to continue my service to Oregon City, as you said, as president of Rediscover the Falls. And you also heard that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization created to build friends and raise funds for the Willamette Falls Riverwalk project. So we go around a little like this. Our mission is to champion a world-class Willamette Falls experience that will offer year-round access to the grandeur of the falls and showcase, of course, our hometown, Oregon City. I'm here today to express our strong support for the Willamette Falls Riverwalk project, for the master plan. In fact, we can't do our job without it. We also support the public process, the creative design and planning, the high level of professionalism that continues to guide this project. And as a former mayor of this community, I'm as deeply committed as you to seizing this incredible opportunity for community building, waterfront redevelopment, transformation, and redeveloping those once productive 22 acres into another economic engine, alongside world-class public spaces, and of course, reopening our view corridors to an amazing asset, Willamette Falls herself. As you know, as we all know, community building is a tough, multifaceted job, and these days, no one party can bear the burden of fully paying for those kind of public infrastructure and facilities. So partnerships and strategic alliances are absolutely essential. So this is the case, as you know, from the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, a collaborative partnership between you, the City of Oregon City, Clackamas County, Metro, the Governor's Regional Solution Team, and now Rediscover the Falls. We're the latest to the table. But we're proud to be the community-based friend building and fundraising arm. And last year, our board, a robust group of volunteer citizens, business and community leaders, and philanthropists, developed the first major capital campaign plan for Rediscover the Falls, fueled, of course, by the majestic Willamette Falls and our shared desire to create a new landmark for Oregon. So together we set a bold goal. We're only going to raise $10 million to complete a series of signature pieces along the new Riverwalk. Based on the support and interest to date from influential benefactors, we're confident we can achieve that goal, maybe more. To help us prepare for such an ambitious campaign, Rediscover the Falls has been leading VIP tours on the last Friday of each month, attending community conversations, special events, and supporting our Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners out in the community. We even hosted a hard hat happy hour, some of you were there, to unveil the new Riverwalk design in May to a group of select patrons. So to date, we've made hundreds of new friends, new project friends, nurtured new champions, strengthened our board of directors, and cultivated numerous high-level donors, because that's what it'll take. While raising money is never easy, selling the majestic Willamette Falls takes only one viewing. Once you feel the spray of the falls in your face and hear the wild roar of the river, you're hooked. As my dear friend and Rediscover the Falls board member, Carlotta Collette, who's been mentioned several times tonight, our former Metro councilor, has said more than once, this project will give Oregonians and visitors an up-close experience of one of the most beautiful and significant places in the state, a place that the general public has not been able to access for nearly 150 years. Together, we believe we can make this new legacy happen. Our communities, our economies, our friends are counting us. Thank you, and thank you for doing your piece.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Alice.
Commissioner Schrader.
Well, good evening, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners. My name is Martha Schrader, and I am a Clackamas County Commissioner. And we are one of the 4 legacy partners, the agency partners that make up the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. And I'm here today to share Clackamas County's support for the Willamette Falls Riverwalk Master Plan as presented today. When the mill closed in 2011, when you lost more than 175 jobs and gained 22 acres of vacant industrial waterfront property, we knew that as with partnerships that we had an opportunity for redevelopment. So we joined together, you, Oregon City, Metro, and the state of Oregon to assist with redevelopment and job creation. And we believe that this is a critical investment to make the Riverwalk accessible to folks. So for the first time, as Mayor Norris said, in 150 years, people can access the falls. And I'm proud to also let you know I am part of the Regional Solutions Committee that also helped prioritize this project as a key element, not just for Oregon City, not just for Clackamas County, but for the region. So creating a unique public setting at the falls will have the potential to shape a new identity and sense of place, not only for the former mill site and regional center of downtown Oregon City, but for West Lynn, Clackamas County, Oregon City, Lake Oswego, all the cities that actually, have waterfront property on the river. It is absolutely an amazing project. We fully support and are excited about this vision directed by the community and the project's 4 core values that the master plan outlines. The county believes the Riverwalk will benefit this area's economy, transform the site into a regional amenity and a 4-season destination, stimulate private investment, create both short-term and permanent jobs, improve habitat, and honor the unique historic nature of this place. Redevelopment will transform Oregon City's already tremendous downtown into a national caliber destination, infusing a strong core with new energy, more people, and a unique sense of place. This is a transformative project, and I'm so happy that our county, in partnership with the visionary folks here in Oregon City, the visionary folks at Metro, the visionary folks at the Rediscover the Falls, are pulling together to make this important project happen. Thank you. You have the full support of the county, and I also want to thank you for being the host city for the county, and we hope to continue a positive partnership with you folks for the many, many years to come. Mayor Dan, I'm looking at you. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. So, MG Devereaux and Jonathan Stone.
Mayor Holliday, members of the commission, my name is MG Devereaux, and I'm the Deputy Director for Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. It is my honor to be here representing the state interest to say that this is an incredible accomplishment of the master plan that's before you today. First of all, I want to thank and reward and acknowledge that it is no easy task to keep 4 partners of different levels of government entities together, but we have held together, and we've held together strong since 2011, coming together over what could have been a tragic event for our community is now representing, with this master plan, the possibility of a rebirth. Oregon Parks and Recreation has been participating in this program for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we have a long tradition of participating with local governments through the Main Street program, through the local government grant program, and through the county opportunity grant program. But this offered an opportunity for us to provide technical expertise and analysis and support for a project that has the ability to transform this wonderful location of Oregon City, one of the first main streets in Oregon, into a national destination that brings those 4 core values in the master plan together. And it represents for you the opportunity to step through a new gateway for this area. One of the things I would like to highlight in the plan, because I think it is something that is sometimes overlooked, but that core value of providing historic interpretation back to the site was one that the project team took very seriously. There was a concerted effort from the beginning to find out what the stories of the area were and how to represent those both in the master plan, but also in the stories that we'll continue to tell. The evidence for that really is that the tribal outreach that was conducted as part of this, because that tribal story is an incredible legacy of Oregon City and to the Falls. And so we did some extensive outreach led by Metro and Kelly Reed who worked in both for a little while and still does, to bring the 5 tribes that have historic ties to this area together to find out what stories were important to them and how to honor that legacy and tell the history of their participation with this region in a respectful way. And I think that goes to the entirety of the public outreach program. Having led many master plan processes for Oregon State Parks, it is always difficult to find that right balance between getting the public input that helps shape the site, finding how you change the character of a site or reveal a character of a site. And I think this master plan does that, and it does it eloquently. I want to thank all of the folks from Metro and Oregon City. Their list is very long, but it's in the master plan, who did a tremendous job getting this together. From the state's perspective, as one of the legacy partners, we encourage you to wholeheartedly support this and adopt the master plan.
Thank you, Angie. Jonathan?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Jonathan Stone, and I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Oregon City Association, as well as a resident of Oregon City. I echo all the sentiments that were presented to you so far, and I just want to say, let's get it done. This is an important part of that process. As the operator of your municipal elevator, we have our staff essentially is talking to the public 12 hours a day, and let me tell you, they talk about the Legacy Project with our visiting public as well as our residents all the time, and I'm really happy that I'm assuming you're going to vote yes to pass it tonight, that we can share back with the public that that the city's taken yet another definitive step towards getting the Riverwalk constructed and hopefully a reintegrated downtown with the existing business district that's there. So wholeheartedly encourage you to adopt the master plan.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Okay, is there any discussion?
I just have a few comments. This is a really exciting night for me personally. I remember being a staff person in 2011 when the mill closed, and when all of these efforts began to bring us to where we are today. The development of the partners coming together and the core values starting, going through that process. I just remember so many things concerning this project. And so to be actually sitting here tonight and making a decision is just really, it's really exciting for me personally. But I just wanted to point out, I have no questions about the project. We've been through all that, right? And so what I'd like to say though is just the remarkable coalition of experts that there have been in putting all this together. There's, of course, the partnership itself, the renowned design team, the widespread citizen input, the Native American tribes, all the technical consultants, and the political support around the entire metro statewide area that has been supportive of this project. And so it's a win win-win situation. And using your phrases of restoring a national treasure is just the reason why. There's no question in my mind that that I intend to vote yes this evening for public involvement, for economic redevelopment and development, and so much more. So I just want to acknowledge that I think this is one of the most exciting times to be living in Oregon City.
Anybody else? Okay. So, is there a motion?
One more.
Kind of quick there.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Hyde said a lot of it there, but, and I don't want people to think out in TV land here, you folks, that we're kind of breezing through this, because we've been at this for about 5 years now. And so we're well aware of this, but every time I see that perspective of that drawing of that first phase, I'm just in awe of that thing, and I'm just so happy to be part of this commission that we're going to be here tonight moving this thing along. So.
Okay, well, I'll take the last word on this one. One thing you may have noticed, I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention to the PowerPoint, and that's because I've seen it like 12 times. So as the folks on the Partners Project know, I came from the private sector, and we built things for real, for a living, and it drives me absolutely crazy how long it takes us to get stuff done. And I know I've had people come up to me and say, well, how come you guys aren't doing anything down there? And I go, well, because, you know, the wheels of government grind exceedingly slow. So this is a great milestone to get to. We passed this tonight, and then hopefully we can actually get started with some engineering and planning, and hopefully break ground sometime before the end of my second term. So with that, is there a motion?
Move to approve resolution number 18-04, Willamette Falls Riverwalk Master Plan adoption, please.
Second.
Further discussion? Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Okay, so we're going to take, do you have something else, Phil?
No, thank you very much.
We're going to take about 3 or 4 minutes. To allow the folks that need to leave to go ahead and leave the room, and then we'll come back with our next agenda item. So we'll come back about 5 after.
Thank you very much. So for this agenda item, we have two separate hearings, and we want to make sure that we keep them separate. One is that they're a related topic, which is why they're together on the agenda. The first is its own separate hearing for a fee waiver request. We don't hear too many waiver requests, so I'll walk you through the process that we go through. The second one is an appeal hearing. How we treat those is going to be very different, so we'll be mindful to walk you through what we can and can't do in each of them. So the first one is a fee waiver request for an appeal fee. A little background here is that we received an appeal. Our base fee for appeal is about $3,500. It's $3,488, or at least it was in 2017. And then it also includes actual city attorney costs. And so that's what the request is for the fee waiver. If at any point the application is withdrawn because it is associated with an appeal, the city, for any applications that are withdrawn, the city provides the unused portion of the base fee or any application fee back to the applicant as well. Yes.
Explain that again slowly.
So if you submit an application, we start doing something on that application, then you withdraw that application. We will figure out how much money you've given us with the base fee, or whatever it is, how much money we've spent on the application, and then we'll give you back the net difference, so the unused portion of the fee that you've paid. So that's one component of this as well. As of today, on this specific item, the attorney fees, which is the unknown when you submit your application, is about $2,641.50. And we estimate that if we move forward with the completion of this project, that it would be another $3,200 for a total of $6,000 in attorney fees. And that's in addition to the $3,488. So that would be a total appeal. So that's the background for this. Here's the process that we're going to go through tonight. And so for this item, we're just talking about the appeal fee waiver. And so on the board, you can see the time and the order of operations for people to speak. The item we're related to is just the fee waiver. If someone wants to talk about any issues that are not this appeal fee waiver, this is not the appropriate time. This is the appropriate time for anyone and everyone who wants to speak, although there's some time limits listed. So it's not limited to who can participate, but the grounds for what you say when you participate are limited. The record is open in this case, so we are accepting additional information as it relates to the fee waiver. And on that same note, I wanted to formally enter into the record some additional comments we received from the appellant. They were emailed to the commission. They're on your computers, and there's a copy in the back. It's a little shy of 300 pages. And then also, I wanted to enter into the record from the city's behalf, Resolution 04-01 and Resolution 16-23, and some of their attachments associated with those as well. Are there any questions on this process? It's a little bit different because we have an appellant and an applicant, where normally we don't in our normal land use process. I'll show you the screen a little bit in the future. So the next thing on the list is for legal disclosures. Assistant City Attorney Carrie Richter.
All right, this is a request for a fee waiver, and it's been scheduled for tonight. We've prepared a staff report that's been available 7 days in advance. The procedures we're gonna follow are right there. Anyone wishing to speak on this issue should fill out a speaker's card and give it to Ms. Riggs right now. The speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. With regard to the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply, in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe they apply to the application or consideration. Any person may submit any written material while the public record is open on this limited fee waiver issue. If your person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. If the city commission makes a decision to which you disagree, any issue you may wish to appeal must have been raised before the conclusion of this hearing. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue may not be judged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. So we are going to open the record for this limited fee waiver component of this matter. And I need to ask if any commissioner has any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare.
No.
No.
Does anyone in the audience?
So, is this concerning the application or?
This is just on the fee waiver
On the fee
part.
waiver, no.
We're gonna go through this whole exercise again in a little bit.
No.
And does anyone in the audience wish to question any commissioners about these disclosures? We will now commence with the planning staff report.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to go through the proposed rationale for the fee waiver. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to highlight the points. There's 4 of them. They're listed here. I'll go through them one by one. And just know at the end of this, we'll be asking for the City Commission to make a decision on each of these 4 points individually. So there's sort of 4 reasons why you wouldn't charge a fee, and here they are. And so each one of them we'd want to take a deeper look at. So as I breeze through these 4, let me know if you want in more detailed discussion. There's the staff report goes into a deeper dive as well. Also, just important to note that the staff didn't make a recommendation on the fee waiver because it's a policy decision for the City Commission. So the first of the 4 is, should the City Commission call up the decision for review? This is something that's rare, but it's familiar to us with Parker Knoll, where the City Commission will pull up an appeal or pull up some decision. In this case, the request is to pull up the decision under review. The second test or question is, does fairness dictate a full or partial waiver of the appeal fee? The city code identifying appeal fee waivers is listed there. I bolded the criteria, which is fairness. So it's fairness to the applicant and to opposing parties. You'll hear from each of them tonight. The third question is, does the city lack statutory authority to impose the fee, or do we have statutory authority to impose the fee? And the fourth is the fee unconstitutional? So those are the 4. I will keep them on the screen when people testify, so they're on there as well. Again, with the process, that was the short staff report portion. Next, then the appellant will speak, then the applicant, then public testimony, then back to the rebuttal. And then at the end of this, you have a list of options. You can continue or close the record or do something else, and we'll walk you through that when you get there. Are there any questions on any of the content of the 4 questions or? No?
Anybody? Okay, then I'll open the public hearing, and we'll have the applicant for 15. Appellant for 15 minutes.
Good evening, Commission. James Nassit, I live at 302 Bluff Street here in Oregon City, and I'm the appellant in this matter, and I'm the one requesting the fee waiver in this instance. Thank you for taking the time to hear my appeal. I prepared and I have sent around hard copies of this document dated today. You all have the paper copy, and basically I'm just going to kind of like walk through and explain what I'm trying to convey by this information for you. I went back beginning in 1980 to research how the city has adopted and applied appeal fees and some of the state statutory law that applies to these appeal fees. The first interesting ordinance I found was from May 7th, 1980, which is the City Commission adopting Ordinance 1954, which established a Historic Review Board and its review process, including an appeal to the City Commission. That appeal fee from the HRB to the City Commission was set at $50 in 1980 and remains today $50. As we will see as I walk you through this memorandum, it's quite a different story between the HRB appeal fee and the appeal fee for appealing from the Planning Commission to the City Commission. I found an appeal in 1983 indicating, in 85 that indicated we were charging $100 for the appeal fee that year. This was 2 years after the state adopted or enacted the current the precursor, but the base version of current law ORS 227-181C, which is the statute that authorizes cities like Oregon cities to impose these appeal fees. Some of the key language of ORS 227-181C is that the fee must be prescribed by ordinance or by regulation. And one of the questions that's subject of interpretation is whether a resolution, as opposed to an ordinance or regulation, meets the criteria of that statute, 227-181C. So after that law was passed in 1983, Oregon City enacted 2 ordinances to set its appeal fees. The first was Ordinance 88-1012, which set the appeal right in the text of the code at $200. And then in 1990, the City Commission enacted Ordinance 90-1044, and that set in the ordinance itself the appeal fee at $250, a raise of $50. Now, things changed in 1992. That year, the Commission enacted Ordinance 92.1016, which changed our city code to allow the Commission to set appeal fees by resolution rather than by ordinance. And that's one of my appeal issues, as we will explore further down in this memo. On that same date, since that time, since 1992, Oregon City has set its fees by resolution. In fact, that same day, July 1st, 1992, the Commission adopted Resolution 92.29 and setting a fee at $500. And on December 4th, 1966, we had Resolution 96-45, jumping the fee to $750. A very significant jump occurred in 2001 with Resolution 01-02, which set the appeal fee at $2,400. Then, on January 21st, 2004, which a copy of which the city itself is in terms of the record, is kind of like the base fee that our current resolution was modeled after that one in 2004. And it is the resolution that first included the language plus actual attorney's fees. And I found some interesting language in that hearing the commission report, where to establish the fee system, the staff wrote in the commission report regarding a tracking system, hours tracking system that had been adopted back in 1997 called Time Tracks. And by 2004, staff wrote, previous use of Time Tracks, a job/hour tracking system, has proven unreliable for the past 3 years of data due to inconsistent use. Staff analyzed each application type and estimated hours needed for an average application and created spreadsheets to reflect the category of staff member working on each project for each type of development application. And that year they set the fees at $25.30 plus actual attorney's fees. The next ordinance was July 5th, 2006, and that was Resolution 0401. And in Resolution 0401, I'm sorry, 0618, which amended Resolution 0401, they set the appeal fee at $2,659. However, significantly, in this Resolution 618, the actual attorney's fees language was removed from the fee schedule. And then in 2007, Resolution 0726 set the appeal fee at $3,009, and also in that fee schedule, the actual attorney's fees also was removed from the fee schedule. One thing that I noticed in Resolution 7026 was that there was a 6.7% increase based on this language to accommodate the additional overhead associated with the community development move to an alternate facility. And a question that comes to mind on that matter is, does ORS 227-181C authorize that as a cost that can be transmitted in an appeal fee? Next, August 4th, 2010, it was Resolution 1019. And this was the first time that a resolution was presented by staff to the City Commission as a consent agenda item. All the other ones previous to that were regular agenda items, properly noticed, properly explained during the hearing. This one was not. This was very deep and hidden, and I have to make a confession here. I was sitting on commission at the time, and like all my colleagues, we didn't think anything of this, and we all voted to adopt this resolution, which had lurking deep within it the restoration of the actual city attorney's fees language. So it was back in on that consent agenda vote. September 18th, 2013. Beginning here, we just kind of get through a walkthrough of progressive increases in the fee, all of which include the plus actual attorney fees language. Resolution 1019, 2013, 345 plus actual attorney fees. And actually in my original memo, I have the subsequent resolutions that bring us up to the current time, but they, again, they're just kind of increases based on what appears to be the CPI plus that actual attorney's fee for revision, bringing us to the current resolution at 3348 or 3488 plus actual attorney's fees. So that's the background. So with the little over 4 minutes that I have left on this, I have a number of arguments that I'll rely on, and I'll walk through a couple of these, and when I run out of time, I will run out of time. I'll first run under the fairness standard in 175029C, and I have a few bullet points here. It is not fair that the appellant be required to pay an appeal fee of $3,488 or $10,000 or more after city attorney's fees or after a city for appeal from the Planning Commission to the City Commission when a citizen appealing a historic review board decision to the City Commission only has to pay $50. That's just an astounding discrepancy. In your staff report, staff has said that there's only been one time the actual attorney's fees has been charged since 2004, and that sets up a fairness issue of applying the actual attorney's fees to some parties and waiving it wholly for others, although the staff report doesn't have any information on why that was done or how it was done. It's not fair that appellants be required to pay an appeal fee of $34.88 or $10,000 when neither the base fee or the actual attorney's fees in the current resolution have been justified with facts that they comply with either OCMC 1750-290 or ORS 22181C. In particular, the current fee as set in 2004 Resolution 0401 was simply an estimate due to the fact that staff had been inconsistently using the TimeTrax software, so that there was no factual basis to set a fee either on actual cost or average cost. There's no basis to use the CPI to raise fees and no basis to use the cost of office rent to set a 6.7 increase in fees as was done in Resolution 0726. The fees set by resolution as opposed to ordinance provided inadequate notice both to the public and to the City Commission itself as to the fees being set, their justification, or their implication. An open-ended city attorney fee provision subjects the citizens to the hypothetical possibility of retribution for pursuing their right to free speech or their right to seek redress of grievances against the city in circuit court or at LUBA. If the City Commission feels, finally, if the City Commission feels that my historical, legal, and factual research has revealed legitimate issues within the city's fee structure and has value to the city, then I request respectfully that the Commission take this into account in deciding upon my fee waiver request. Arguments under 227181C. Our code conflicts with that statute, and therefore it is invalid because we do it by resolution and the statute requires it be done by ordinance. I skipped over a discussion from 2006 where both the city manager and the city attorney recognized the difference between an ordinance and a resolution, and the fact that the state can require it to be done by ordinance. And the fact that the Oregon City enacted its appeal fees twice by ordinance demonstrates its understanding of the statute requiring it by ordinance. I will stop there and rely on my written testimony for the remainder unless the commissioners would like to provide extra time or the mayor would like to provide extra time and have me finish up my
So would now be
discussion.
a time to ask questions, or would you?
Sure. Now would be a time to ask questions.
Okay, well, I have a couple, and I'm sure some other folks do too. On page 3 of your testimony, you say that on August 24th, 2010, that the consent agenda included Resolution 10-19. And I would ask, does that suggest that that the commission didn't read the items on the consent agenda and understand what they were? Because I know that generally speaking, when I go through the consent agenda, I read the items and I understand what they are, and people always have an opportunity to pull those items off the consent agenda.
I don't disagree with you. I would say in response that there was no information because the prior resolution was not provided, that there was a change from not having an actual attorney fee provision to now having it restored, or any discussion from staff or the city attorney on that as a legal issue. I think staff and the city attorney do have an obligation under the charter to impress upon commissioners on any board issues of a complicated nature, and explaining what the ramifications were.
Okay.
And in this instance, I don't think it should have been put on the consent agenda.
Okay. Questions, anybody? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, Mr. Nacita, I've always admired your intellect, and I admire your scholarly work. And I understand, I get the history lesson on the history of fees and how they evolved, but I'm not sure how pertinent it is, because if fees were set by resolution, it's not like you're challenging in this summary the right of an institution, a government, to set fees, or even if the methodology is in error.
Let's try to limit this time period to asking questions rather than, we'll have time to discuss after the rest of the procedure.
What's the goal of this summary?
Well, it was to give you back on on the statutes as a preparation for making the legal arguments, which obviously I didn't get all the way through.
Okay.
But one of the arguments is, in law, if a local ordinance conflicts with a state statute, that local ordinance is invalid. So my argument is, because ORS 227-181C specifically requires an ordinance or a regulation to set your fees, then having an ordinance that does it by resolution instead is a conflict with that state statute.
Understood. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Just one quick question.
Commissioner Wright?
Not that I doubt that this is true here, but I'm just wondering, is this something that you just submitted tonight? Because I don't think I saw it in the packet, or all that information.
I brought it almost running from my house.
Okay, okay.
Some habits die hard, unfortunately.
I understand. So my question is, has staff had a chance just to confirm that this data in here is correct? I mean, if it was just submitted today, I'm just curious if
I actually got the materials, the larger stack of exhibits that includes the sort of history earlier today, and I did have a chance to go through it. I think it generally does accurately reflect the history of treating fees. Whether or not it's complete, like if there are other actions that the city has taken, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it's complete as far as he says it is. So yes.
I kind of worked backwards on this by starting with the current resolution, which says, we amended this former resolution and we repealed this one, and just, trace that backwards.
Please, Commissioner Shaw.
So, Mr. Nacita, are you saying that the city commission cannot adopt the fee schedule by resolution?
Yes. That's what my argument is.
Can't do that, but what's ORS 227.1801C?
That's the statute that permits local governments to have fees for appeals like this one. And it's in the text of that statute that indicates that it must be done by ordinance or by regulation. And I earlier, in my earlier submittal from last November, I actually submitted a LUBA case that actually also made the distinction between, ordinances and resolutions.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sear.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from the applicant for 15 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Holliday, members of the City Commission. My name is Michael Robinson. I'm a land use attorney. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon 97204. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant in opposition to the request for a fee waiver. So what I'd like to do is spend just literally a very few minutes talking about what I had originally planned to say, and then respond to the testimony you just heard from the proponent for the fee waiver. The City Commission's focus has to be on the standard that's in your code for granting a fee waiver in whole or in part. And the applicant doesn't believe that you have substantial evidence before you to find that the standard for granting a fee waiver in whole or in part has been met. And that issue in your code is fairness, and I'll deal with Mr. Nacita's other issues in a moment. But I think the Commission should ask itself, why is it fair to grant a fee waiver in this case? Keep in mind, this application has been before the city staff since July. We had 5 Planning Commission hearings. The record, in fact, I couldn't bring it tonight because I didn't have enough boxes to carry it. The record that was concluded at the Planning Commission fills 4 3-ring binders that are this wide, literally thousands of pages. And your staff has expended an enormous amount of time. The applicant and its supporters have expended an enormous amount of time. You're not anywhere near capturing all of your cost. All this does is ask the appellant to repay the base fee, which is not even the actual fee of your staff time, plus the actual city attorney's fees. Why is it unfair to any appellant not to bear that cost after all the procedure that the public has spent on this time? And I don't believe, and I hope you arrive at the same conclusion, that very basic standard in your code has not been satisfied by substantial evidence, which is Mr. Nacita's burden. Let me talk about a couple of other things. I'd note, and Commissioner Hyde, I think you asked a good question. You had about 300 pages of documents submitted to you tonight. This appeal was filed months ago. The briefing, such as it was on the fee waiver, came in with the appeal. Why did we just hear it tonight? And I know that the standard that I just addressed in Oregon City Municipal Code 1750290C, which is the fairness standard, was we could have made all these arguments then. We could have had all that evidence then. But this is just part of the reason that I believe you can find that it is in fact unfair to other parties in this case not to charge the appeal fee in this case, the base appeal fee and the actual city attorney's fees, when you have this much process and this much demand on staff and city attorney time. So first of all, the appellant hasn't satisfactorily addressed, in our view, the standard under your code. For that reason alone, you should reject the appeal fee waiver request. I also want to address the issues that are on the slide before you. There's no reason to call this matter up. Unlike Parker and Knoll, there's no public policy issue here that requires the City Commission to call it up. As I just said, under your code, it's a fairness standard. It's not fair to the applicant or other parties to allow this proceeding to occur without the appellant having to pay some fees. I should say that there's clearly no statutory authority lacking for the city to do what it's done. State law is very clear. The proponent for the fee waiver cites no state or federal case that even comes close to suggesting that fees like this, which you should take official notice of, are charged by every jurisdiction. None of them have. This is not a case of first impression, but nowhere do we find in the record a case where a state or federal court or LUBA has said that these fees are statutorily impermissible. And lastly, it is certainly not unconstitutional to impose the fees that have been imposed. The only case cited by the proponent is a recent Court of Appeals case, Oregon Court of Appeals case called Bell v. City of Hood River. And that case involved the same constitutional provision that he cites here, the Justice for Purchase Clause. The court said about the Justice for Purchase Clause, it applies to courts, not administrative proceedings like this. So the only constitutional authority cited to you in support of the fee waiver is a case that's not on point. It doesn't apply to administrative agencies. He also cites, and this is relevant to the memorandum you received tonight, in his affidavit, that this fee would be onerous. Bell had in dicta, which means it's not a holding. It's sort of like in passing, we're going to add this other thought. Bell had in dicta that in certain cases it might be onerous, and that might therefore raise a due process question. First of all, it's just dicta. It's not binding law. And secondly, and we said this in my letter dated January 30, 2018, which is before you, tell us what onerous means. It's still not defined. So I don't think that dicta from Bell is a basis for this city commission to find that it doesn't have the constitutional authority to impose the fees that it does. So the city commission has the statutory authority. There's no case cited to any of us that says that you can't impose the fee. You're doing what state law requires. For all of those reasons, not to mention the fact that the standard under your code hasn't been satisfactorily addressed, the fee waiver should not be granted. Now, if I could, let me spend what I hope would just be a few minutes and talk about what we heard tonight. First of all, I think first and foremost, this long history, and I have no reason to disagree with either Ms. Nocita or the city attorney that's accurate. I haven't had enough time to look at it, but I'll tell you why it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant for two reasons. It's effectively a collateral attack on what past city commissions have done. If Mr. Nocita or any other citizen believed that the way the city commission was conducting business with respect to establishing appeal fees was either illegal or unconstitutional, at the time the city commission acted was the appropriate time to challenge that, not literally 30 years after the fact. And secondly, what's been done in the past doesn't have any bearing to the very specific facts you're being asked to decide on tonight. So I think it's interesting, and I don't begrudge those documents becoming part of the record, but I don't think they're a basis for your decision making. Secondly, there's this argument that somehow you're doing something that's unlawful under state law, and that's clearly not the case. The legislature said that you can charge actual or average fees. So it's your choice. In fact, I would tell you, you could charge more than your appeal fees are asked for, but you're not doing that. There's nothing impermissible under state law that's present here. You're doing what state law allows. This argument that doing it by resolution doesn't comport with state law because the state law says by ordinance or regulation is, to me, form over substance. And I do not believe that LUBA or any of our courts would find that to be an argument with merit. And I will tell you, I hope this is helpful. So years ago when I was first practicing law, I made I thought it was a great argument in front of the Court of Appeals. And I remember one of the judges, and he seemed to be sitting up there awfully high, looking down at me. He said, "You know, Mr. Robinson, that's really gamesmanship." And I hate to say that about one of my arguments, but in retrospect, he was right. What the law seeks to find is, are you complying with the essence, with the spirit? And I do not believe that doing something by resolution is non-compliant with a statute that says by ordinance or regulation. So I simply don't think that's a valid argument. I will also tell you the case he cited, Doty v. City of Bannon, is not on point. It deals with an entirely different situation. I don't think it's support for his argument. So nothing under the Constitution prohibits you from doing what you're doing. Nothing under state law prohibits it. We believe you've acted appropriately, and he hasn't addressed with specific facts the basis under your code for this body granting an appeal fee waiver in whole or in part. So on behalf of the applicant, we would ask the City Commission to reject the appeal fee waiver request and make a decision tonight. The only other thing I would ask, Mayor, if you determine to keep the record open and continue the hearing, I think either the next or the prior slide said February 21st. I apologize, I'm not available that night, so if you wanted to continue it, we would ask you to continue it until March 7th when I could be available. That's, you don't have to do that, but it would be my request, and we thank you for your time tonight.
Questions for Mr. Robinson? No? Okay, I have one. Actually, I have two. So approximately how much does it cost the applicant per month in delays?
I think it's in Mr. Mayor, you want to come up then?
Dan Fowler. That's a hard question to answer specifically. If a delay in this nature causes a potential user of our project or the hotel to actually be not be built, it could cost us millions in terms of lost activity, and it could lose a lot in terms of jobs. It could lose a lot in terms of room tax revenue and property tax. So, you know, it just takes, this is a supply and demand industry. It just takes somebody else to come in and start building hotels, and pretty soon the numbers on your economic study don't work. Or a franchisee looks at it and says, if this is going to be delayed another month or two or three or a year, we're not waiting. So there's a lot of things. I mean, this is not an easy game where a lot of people would be in it. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. And I'm certainly not going to ask you to be specific on this, but between you and the rest of the partners, have you spent more or less than $1 million so far?
I would say close to that number.
Okay, thank you. I have one additional question, and then I'll get to you, Commissioner O'Donnell. So give me the legal difference between a resolution or a regulation.
Mayor, I'm not sure that there's a meaningful distinction. I think the argument advanced by Mr. Nocita, and if I get it wrong, I apologize, is a regulation is more in the nature of a permanent action, much like an ordinance is, whereas a resolution can be temporal and changed. But I think for purposes of what if I may, I think for purposes of what the legislature meant, they don't really care about the form. What they want is an action by ordinance or regulation, in the words of the statute, something that either one that establishes the city commission's, in this case, view on what the appeal fee should be.
Something that's written down.
Yeah, I frankly do not think LUBA or a reviewing court is going to find any material difference between the city commission and how the city commission acted. And I'll just make this very quick. I think more importantly, they're going to look at this and say this is all a collateral attack on past actions.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Could we return to the slide with the 4 decision points on it, please? I'm going to couch this in the form of a statement and consider you can correct me. Be assured that I've read the appellant's summary, I've read the applicant's summary, I've read the staff report, and I look at the appeal fee much like a filing fee. You file it and you proceed with your proceeding, and then there's this liability for attorney fees that can only be determined as the proceeding closes. I don't see anything in there that requires a posting of a performance bond, so I don't see that as punitive in any way. Would you agree with that summation, or is it erroneous?
I agree with it.
So, you know, the 4 points we're being asked to discuss is the call-up decision for review, and why would we? The issue of fairness. In my mind, the question of statutory authority, my gosh, you know, governments have the ability to tax, and they have the ability to set fee schedules. And I don't understand. I quite honestly, I went through that whole summary with the appellant, and other than the history lesson, I don't know if the issue was I don't like the fees we've arrived at, or they're not justified. But to me, that's not the issue at hand tonight. And the fact that imposing a fee is unconstitutional, I can't buy into that argument. I think it comes with the authority of government to impose reasonable fees as determined to the best of their ability.
Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
We will hear from the rebuttal from or do we have testimony?
The public testimony.
Okay.
Do we have any public testimony cards?
I think we should clarify that we probably received, because it was one agenda item, we might have
receive public comment requests that might not be specific to the fee waiver. So maybe we could walk through those and ask them if they want to speak on this issue, and then we can redo this for the second hearing.
So we have just William Gifford, Jerry Herman, and Paul Edgar, and Paul has submitted that he wants to speak on the fee waiver.
Okay, how about Mr. Gifford and Mr. Herman? Do you guys want to speak on the fee waiver?
On this issue, yes.
Okay, well, Mr. Gifford and Mr. Edgar, come on up.
Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, I'm still William Gifford, still live in Oregon City. One of my very wise children told me laws should not be made just for the rich. And I really think it's an insightful statement. They should be across the board fair. I wanted to give you a little quote from, and I finally found the source for it, from an individual named James Hinton from 1856, if we want to talk about history. And I'm just going to jump to the punchline sentence in this paragraph. It is indeed probable that the only clear idea is one that has been clearly expressed. A clear idea can be said clearly. I like that a lot. To build on that a little more, it seems to me as though if someone has a clear idea, it should not be difficult to muster support for that idea. If that's a clear idea, and it's just that there should be an upwelling of support for that idea. And I have not seen any support of this idea from a neighborhood association, from a large group of people. We're not having a standing room only meeting on this particular fee issue. It seems to me as though this is not a clear idea, that this is obfuscation. This is muddying the waters to some other end other than the actual issue of a fee waiver. And I would certainly hope that you would consider the lack of support for this unclear idea.
Mr. Edgar.
Thank you. I'm Paul Edgar, Oregon City. This issue is about, to me, creating circumstances where we invite the citizens to become involved, or we don't. And it's about public participation, and the idea that not all of us are perfect. And I surely can't argue or even want to get into some of the legalities of what attorneys can say or do, because I want to speak just about a citizen's viewpoint about making sure that we don't make fees so unreasonable that we shut off the debate and shut off public involvement in such a way that it's self-defeating, and it in fact causes more people to say, I can't fight City Hall, or I can't fight this, or we can't even, I give up, we just walk away. And anything that causes me to think that people become disinvolved is just wrong. And I think that what is being asked for is let's move on with the process, let's get on with things, but let's not set fees or structures so high that they become onerous and self-defeating. This is like, why should anybody run for office or do anything? It's going to happen anyway. That's wrong. I want to make sure it's inclusive. And I'm concerned that this dollar amount, flexible that can go on, creates a situation that will be self-defeating in the long haul, and will actually look down upon this process as something that put a wet blanket on the citizenry and made it less inviting for them to ever say anything or be involved. I just hope that there is some reason, and I don't believe right now at $3,500 in an open-ended fee makes it in reason, and I think that that will hurt us, and I therefore think it is reasonable to come up with some negotiation on it, put it to a vote, and then just end it, and let's move on with the process. But right now, it's going to hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Then we'll hear rebuttal from the appellant. You have 5 minutes, sir. Mr. Nocita?
I'm looking through my notes. Here. Okay. I'm just going to add some points from my memo that I think go to some of the issues, the constitutional issues that Mr. Robinson raised. Right now we have a situation based on what I've written and what the staff report says, that there were 3 appeals beginning in from 2004 to 2007, 3 appeals where the base fee was charged, but the actual attorney fees were not charged. So the staff has not given any background on who filed appeals, whether the fees were requested or whether they were waived or not. It seems, however, that once you get into a situation where you are waiving an actual attorney's fees amount that would normally lead to several $1,000s for some parties, and then to other parties you assess the full amount of the actual attorney's fees against them without giving any explanation of the differential treatment, then you are getting into some serious federal constitutional issues. You're getting into the due process clause of the federal Constitution in the language of your ordinance that said it's a fairness standard, which is not really a criteria. It's a rather a vague standard, and there are problems with due process when the code as written is what's called unconstitutionally vague. What is fairness? I mean, how do you assign, criteria to that, to what is decision, what's a clear and objective standard for deciding what's fair and what's not? It seems to be arbitrary and capricious as well, just to say you can have a full waiver of the attorney fees that we accrued in this appeal, but you can't have a waiver of those attorney's fees. And that not only to due process, but that also goes to the Equal Protection Clause of the federal Constitution, as well as the Privileges and Immunities Clause of Article 120, section of the Oregon Constitution. So I think I don't have anything more to say beyond that, and I will close early. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Okay. Does anybody have any final questions for the appellant? Then I'll close the public hearing. So time for deliberations. Who wants to start? Commissioner Shaw. Did you have something you want to say, Ms. Richter?
Oh, we're working on that.
I just want to follow up with a point that Mr. Nacita made with regard to the staff report where we've identified the 3 cases where no attorney fees were charged. I think that the materials that Mr. Nacita has provided indicate that at the time, no attorney fees weren't part of the fee resolution. He identified that the fee resolution appeared in 2004 and then disappeared until 2010. So the fact that we didn't charge attorney fees, actual attorney fees for those 2000, I don't know the date of the AP 040007, but certainly the AP 08002 and 0004 matters would have been, I mean, I haven't matched it up exactly, but
In that time frame.
In that time frame.
So to follow up on that, have we ever charged an appellant both the base fee and the attorney's fees?
Yes.
The last appeal this year.
Okay.
Just as a point of fact.
Sir, you're done. We're now in debate.
I look at this chart, and this was furnished by Laura Turway. And quite honestly, I can't read anything into it other than the fees, the actual attorney fees weren't charged. I don't know if that's because of a conscientious decision or ineptitude or what. It doesn't really give us any, it doesn't say, you know, these amount of fees were accumulated but not charged. So we really can't make a decision based on this. The balance of it looks pretty straightforward. An appeal was withdrawn shortly after submittal, and the most recent, a base fee was charged plus invoice for actual attorney. So, I mean, I know the concepts we're talking about, fairness and onerous, I mean, those are among the most vague things to define. So, I'll yield the floor to others.
So I apologize. Back to Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you. No, it's, to me, it is fairness. And it's a fairness between the appellant, the applicant, but also the citizens of the city who are going to absorb all this if we waive it. And when you talk about how much material there is, I mean, right here, we've got 3 pages here in front of us tonight just on things that I got to go through Sunday when I do this stuff. And I can imagine what Ms. Turway's office's department has gone through with all of this. And I think we as elected officials here have got to look and see how the fairness is to our constituents, and do we want them to pay this, or should the applicant have to do that?
You ready?
Yeah, in terms of fairness.
Your mic button's on?
I'm sorry. In terms of fairness, the fee schedule and the conditions have been in resolution or statute or whatever it is for a long time. So everyone knows the rules. People have the opportunity to state their case in front of the Planning Commission and at the City Commission hearing. So the general public can voice their opinions for free. And so I feel that people have the opportunity to weigh in, and that the cost to the city in evaluating the information provided and the legal review needs to be paid for if someone's going to challenge it. So I'm persuaded that we do not need to waive the fee in this instance.
And Commissioner O'Donnell.
You know, I reviewed the Bell versus City of Hood River case, and I mean, I looked at and I understand the difference between dicta and the actual opinion itself. It's almost a sidebar where this is a commentary on the decision. But then I looked at, you know, the gist of the matter was justice shall be administered without purchase. Well, quite honestly, I don't feel the requirement for a fee denies one justice. It's just it's correct in its form, I believe. So I'm not struggling with the application of the fee.
Commissioner Hyde?
So it comes down for me to authority. Authority, who has the right to charge the fees or waive the fees? And, you know, the state said by ordinance or regulation. And the city being, Oregon City being a home rule city, we have the authority to make those decisions. And it seems to me that if we choose to pass fees by resolution, that is our choice as a home rule city, and we have exercised that authority in that case. So I agree with Commissioner Shaw that if we waive fees, who's going to be the responsible party to pay those actual costs? Because there are many. And so I feel like that's why the home rule authority that we have to create the system to get the fees paid needs to be honored here. And we need to waive the fees. I mean, excuse me, we need to deny waiver of the fees.
Okay, so I'm going to ask staff or other folks a couple of questions. One, Laura, I assume the public had the opportunity, including the appellant, to make their argument about this appeal at the Planning Commission level?
Correct.
And could you give me an estimate of how many people came and then gave public testimony in opposition to the plan?
I don't know how that's relevant to the fee waiver. In opposition, I can tell you the number of people that testified. Is that?
It's the plan or the waiver, Dan?
Can I ask that question or not?
You can ask the question. I think that, I'm not sure that the answer to the question is relevant to anything, but you can ask the question and we can answer it because we have a list and we'll count the names. We don't have them broken down by whether they oppose the application on the merits.
Okay, just generally, how many people came and testified?
About 30.
Okay. So there was plenty of public process. How many times did this come before the Planning Commission before a decision was made?
Handful.
I think I heard the
4 or 5.
I think I heard the applicant's attorney say 5.
Okay. So.
That's right.
The other question is, how many times has someone other than the applicant appealed a decision from the Planning Commission to the City Commission?
It's happened before.
In recent memory? Has it happened while you've been in the planning department?
I've been here 15 years. So
And has it happened while you've been in the planning department?
Yes, well, certainly neighborhood associations have, and I can think of one that I did see. What was the neighbor?
Okay.
Yeah, it happens.
And the appellant,
There's 6 since 2004.
and the appellant had the opportunity, and I believe took the opportunity to go before the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, right, to see if he could gain support to appeal this to the City Commission.
It's not in this record.
Can I ask that question?
You could ask that question to the appellant or to the applicant.
Either or.
Do you have to reopen the record?
You have to
Okay,
reopen the record.
so we'll reopen the record, and I'll let you both come up and let me ask you these 2 questions.
And may I ask Mr. Fowler to come up with me, please?
Sure.
Mayor Holliday, members of the City Commission, Mike Robbins again on behalf of the applicant. So the answer to the question is there were 3 neighborhood associations that appeared before and had standing before the Planning Commission. One of them supported the application, and I believe the other 2 did not. One neighborhood association never took up the issue of a fee waiver. The McLaughlin Neighborhood Association And Dan knows the history better than I do, so I'm going to summarize this. Apparently, without a general membership vote, granted a fee waiver, and then in a general membership meeting that I think was the Monday night before Thanksgiving, where you had about 60 people, 60 members of the neighborhood association present, voted to rescind the fee waiver. So none of the neighborhood associations appealed the decision, and therefore none of them had the ability to ask for a fee waiver, because under your code, the neighborhood association has to be an appellant to seek a fee waiver. But none of them sought a fee waiver. None of them filed an appeal.
Yeah, that's, excuse me, Dan Fowler. That's basically correct, but the bottom line, when there was a specific request for a fee waiver and supported that by the neighborhood group, was the very last meeting of the McLaughlin neighborhood. And it was voted 32-3 to not support it.
Okay. Mr. Nocita?
The sequence was as follows. The McLaughlin Neighborhood Association Steering Committee first voted to appeal the hotel and request a fee waiver.
Was the applicant?
This was the steering committee of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. It was not the general membership meeting. The city ordinance allows both a steering committee and a general membership to vote to appeal and request a fee waiver, and that has happened in more than one neighborhood. When the steering committee voted to do so, it also decided to take the decision to the general membership meeting. And that happened, I believe, on November 2nd. During that meeting, there was a motion to rescind the steering committee's approval or vote to appeal and request a fee waiver. The first vote on that was a tie. The chair therefore took a second vote, which also resulted in a tie. Then on the third vote, the motion to rescind the steering committee's decision failed, I think by 2 votes. Thereafter, Mr. Fowler and some other members of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association requested of the chair of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, who is also the chair of the Planning Commission, to hold a special meeting, a third meeting. And it is at that third meeting where Mr. Fowler and his friends, having organized a crowd, at that third meeting, the general membership of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association at that point voted to rescind the decision of the steering committee to appeal the hotel and request a fee waiver.
Okay, one last question. At that first meeting where you said there was 2 votes, was the applicant allowed, invited, notified, or allowed to attend that meeting?
At the first general membership meeting after the steering committee,
yes,
the applicant, both Mr. Foley and Mr. Fowler, were present at that meeting. And having lost the vote is when they decided they were going to organize a special meeting, a third meeting.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions of the appellant?
I need to correct
the
record.
Sure, come on up one last time, and then I'm closing the record.
I'm sorry. I mean, I want to just correct a few statements. One, I never requested a special meeting of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Group. That was done by the members of the steering committee that felt that the process was not fair to us, the applicant, because we did not have notice of that meeting. Mark and I showed up to hear a report in the neighborhood and found out it was on the agenda. It was not on the postcard. There was no notice given to us. Second of all, the motions that were done at those first meetings never included a fee waiver request. It was about the appeal only. There was never any language about a fee waiver request. The only language about a fee waiver request was at the last meeting, and that was defeated 32-3.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the record. Anybody else have any further questions? Okay, then I'm going to take these things one at a time. If my screen will ever come up. So first question is, the City Commission wishes to call up a decision for the review. And as we all have committed, generally, when the Planning Commission does something, unless there's something that really stands out, we support the Planning Commission's decision. And I believe the decision in this one was unanimous.
That's correct.
Correct? I think I saw that in the record, which I didn't say 7-0 because I couldn't remember. So the question is, does the City Commission wish to call the decision up for review? Can I have a motion to that effect? You trying to get me there?
Is not the question, do the circumstances described validate the city commission exercising their call-up authority? Is there anything in the record that shows that? And I don't see anything.
Is that a question or a statement?
Well, it's an explanatory statement of where I think we're at.
Do we have a motion to support all four of these somewhere?
So we have a list of motions on the screen, and that's after you answer the 4 questions to decide if you want to waive.
I think that we're pretty clear that, I mean, from the deliberation, that you don't wish to call the decision up.
So I don't have to have a separate motion on each one of these? Okay, thank you, that's all I need.
Because we're gonna come back with findings that support your deliberation, and your deliberation to date has not been to call it up.
That's correct. So we'll go to question 2. Fairness to the applicant and all parties dictates a full or partial waiver of the appeal fee. Does anybody feel like they wish to waive part or all of the appeal fee?
I do not.
Okay. Fee waiver should be granted because the city lacks statutory authority to impose a fee. I don't think any of us even remotely believes that.
No. I do not.
And a fee waiver should be granted because imposing the fee is unconstitutional.
No.
As the oldest city west of the Rocky Mountains, we've had statutory authority longer than almost anyone else even on the West Coast. So, with those 4 questions answered.
The motion is tentative approval of the, the motion is tentative denial of the fee waiver request for planning file AP 170006. With tentative approval, with a continuance to March 7, 2018 for the adoption of findings.
So moved.
Second.
Call roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
And Mayor Holliday?
Aye. So if we're continuing that, does that mean we're not going to do the appeal tonight?
No, it means we're going to move forward with the appeal tonight. We're
Okay.
going to proceed with a new staff report. We're going to have our disclosures, but before we, and so we're gonna do that. And then we're going to ask the, when you open the record, we're gonna ask the appellant if he wishes to proceed, given the result of the fee waiver decision.
Okay.
So if you want to take a break, now would be the time. Or
Yeah.
we can move forward.
No, let's take a break, 5 minutes, because we're running up against our policy timeline.
Yeah, the one you just put in last time.
All right. We're back in session.
Do you have the clicker? Shoot.
I want to be clear about something as we move forward, and that is that when you see us get up and take a break, we never discuss any of the things that are on the agenda or any decisions that we might be deliberating to outside of a regular city commission meeting. And I think that that can be confirmed by every single staff member, and the there's always one of our attorneys back there as well. So I just want to be clear on that before we move forward. So we're now on phase 2. Who wants to start? Ms. Turway?
Thank you very much. So this is the appeal of the conditional use detailed development plan and natural resource overlay district for development near 17th and Washington Street. Here's the appeal process listed. It's similar to what we saw earlier tonight, but slightly different. So it is to open the hearing and do the legal disclosures and then provide the opportunity for the applicant to withdraw, just knowing the outcome of the fee waiver. And then if the application is not withdrawn, we'll go through staff report, and then you'll see a series of testimony and rebuttals. And then at the end, we have a menu of options for the commission to move forward. Before we get into it, Assistant City Attorney Carrie Richter with legal disclosures.
Ms. Richter.
An appeal on a land use application is scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared with regard to this appeal and has been made available to the public 7 days before this hearing. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure the commission will follow is set out in state law and Oregon City Municipal Code, and it's up there on the screen. This hearing is different from the previous hearing for a couple of reasons. First, the public record is closed, which means no new evidence may be submitted. So you are reviewing the appeal issues with regard to the evidence that is already in the record. I want to make it clear that the evidence that you heard for the fee waiver should not be considered as part of this review. Can't imagine how it would be relevant, but I want to make that clear that the record is closed and no new evidence is going to come in, has come in since the Planning Commission closed the matter. And the other thing that's different is that the only people who can participate in this appeal hearing are those who participated before the Planning Commission, and Ms. Turway has a list, and so when folks get up, we'll check their names off the list to make sure that they did testify below. Anyone who did testify below wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. Please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, please identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe that they apply to the application under consideration, with the limitation that they have to be issues that were raised in the notice of appeal. They can't be issues beyond those raised in the notice of appeal, and I think there are 13 or 15 or so of those issues. A person may submit written material, argument only, while the public record is open. Any materials mailed to the staff during the time period which the record is open will be placed in the record, assuming that they're limited to argument only, and the limited issues raised on appeal. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits to be used in their oral testimony and placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. If the City Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the City Commission. without raising the issue in the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be judged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure to raise, for an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we are going to open the public hearing for Oregon City file number PC 1801 AP 170006. Does any commissioner have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare?
No.
No, I do not.
No.
The only thing I have to declare is what was previously declared about my participation at a Clackamas Heritage Partners meeting. Do you want me to go further with that? That there was a request for the Clackamas Heritage Partners to write a letter of support for the hotel, and I was at that meeting because I'm a board member, and I did not participate in the meeting, and I actually left early, so that's all I have to say about that.
Carrie, so I have attended the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association meetings as a spectator and was not involved when any of this was brought before them, so.
Does anyone in the audience wish to question the commissioners about these disclosures? Has any commissioner visited the site?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you had any site, do you wish to declare anything that you perceive with regard to this matter?
No.
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 Nothing.
Anyone in the audience wish to question the commissioners about these disclosures? Seeing none, we will now, well, before we get to the planning staff report, I want to make two other points. I want to make it clear that the commission is aware that all the materials that were transmitted to the city commission through the Agenda Legistar program, I believe that's what it's called, are placed before you. So in other words, the planning commission record, including all of the materials, have been placed before you and are part of the record.
But that did not include the information that was submitted at the late hour tonight.
No, it did not include, so we've got two different records here. We have a record for purposes of the substance of the appeal, and then we have a record for purposes of the fee waiver, and they're separate. The second thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the applicant, given the results of the fee waiver denial, I want to make sure that the appellant does wish to proceed with the appeal.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
before we do that? What mechanisms do we have in place to ensure that that the attorney's fees are paid?
We send invoices, so like, for example, well, actually, that's not part of this. So we send invoices.
And let's assume for sake of argument that the invoices are ignored. What is the process for collection?
We'd have to think about that and get back to you. I don't know that we've ever had that.
We must have processes in place in other places in the city for collection of outstanding fees. Mr. Parno?
That's correct, Mayor.
And what might those procedures be?
Nice try.
It depends. Thank you, Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners.
And remember, you're an accountant, not a lawyer, so.
It depends. No, it's actually really specific, but for each of the different fees, we follow different processes, and I'm sorry, we were talking about which specific fees?
The attorney's fees that were not waived in the earlier appeal.
Okay. So we have processes where we make contact, soft contact. We also use collection agencies, and in cases where there's properties involved, we can use liens. There's some other processes like that. So it'd probably be the collection effort process.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Fisher, go ahead.
So I think before we get started on the substance of the appeal, I want to give the appellant an opportunity to withdraw their appeal given the result of the fee waiver denial. And so this would be the time that we would offer the appellant that opportunity.
Mr. Nacita, you want to come up?
Jim Nacito, Oregon City. Thank you for the opportunity to withdraw my appeal. I will not be withdrawing my appeal.
We'll proceed with the staff report.
All right. Oops. So this project, a general overview, it was for a master plan, including development of the first phase of that master plan. That master plan was a 10-year master plan, which means there was a 10-year duration to build out the subject site. Phase 1 was included with this application. It included a 5-story hotel with about 99 rooms and some associated frontage improvements. The second phase, as a part of the master plan, was additional 131 apartment units with some retail and coffee shops and parking lots associated with that as well. It did include a retention of existing Hackett House, which is an individually designated structure outside of a historic district. And here I'll go through a couple of the site plans as well. So here's the site plan for phase 1. You can see here's obviously Washington Street and 17th Street. Hackett House is right here, which is the historic house we just mentioned previously. So phase 1 includes this hotel-oriented in a north-south direction, and then phase 2 would include development over in this area on Washington Street. A couple of elevations of the proposed building, obviously from the north and from 17th Street, so you see the Hackett House, as well as the vegetation between the two as well. And this is from Washington Street, which is the east elevation, and a closer view of that as well. So there are 15 appeal issues in this case. Rather than deep dive into all of them, I will just go through them. If you have any questions or want to talk about any of them individually, we'd be happy to respond. On the screen, you'll see an overall idea of what the appeal issue was, and then some specific code citations that were identified by the appellant. The first one was failure to comply with the neighborhood association meeting requirement. The second one is failure to utilize materials and a design that matches the Hackett House. We grouped these appeal issues. There's 15. Some of them are related, so we grouped them together just for the purposes of our discussion. So 13 and 12 identified a failure to require a variance rather than an adjustment through our master plan process. And then there's 4 of them related to the end of the Oregon Trail design guidelines. There's a couple related to a failure to obtain a variance rather than a modification. This may sound similar to what I just said earlier, which was failure to obtain a variance rather than an adjustment. So we have 2 things in our code. One is an adjustment process through master plan, and this is a modification process through some street design standards within our code. So it's modification to street designs. It's more specific. 7 and 8 are a failure to comply with stormwater management and applicable, state water quality standards. Number 13 is failure to give notice to applicable tribal representative. 14, failure to utilize a watershed scale assessment, and there was no Goal 5 analysis of stormwater impacts in the Clackamas Cove. And the last one was a failure of the Planning Commission to consider the request for reconsideration. So there's all 15 listed. I'll flick back to the appeal process and then let the appellant and the applicant discuss. This one's a little bit different than the last one because the applicant, at the end of the day, has the onus to identify that they comply with all approval criteria. So in this case, the applicant has the last say.
So I have a couple questions first. So each of those things that we just went through were discussed, testified on, and debated, and ultimately decided at the Planning Commission?
We believe the big picture ones were all part of the record. There is one that we're uncertain if that is part of the record or if it was vested in Planning Commission. The applicant can talk a little bit more about it.
Okay. All right, then I will open the public hearing and we'll hear from the appellant. Once again, you have 15 minutes, sir.
Thank you. James Nacito, Oregon City. I'm going to open my discussion and my comments tonight in pretty much the same way I opened my comments before the Planning Commission when the hearing started. I brought to that hearing a copy of the 1990 end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan. And I did so for a particular reason, and that is that I am really personally deeply inspired by this plan. Early in my tenure on commission, I was introduced to this document by Commissioner Smith, whom I got elected the same year as. And upon reviewing it, I was just very inspired by it. And in the McLaughlin meetings, I've given credit to everybody who worked on to produce this, including Mr. Fowler. And I think it's a vision that lasts and that I'm very dedicated to, and was on the commission. Perhaps Commissioner Shaw remembers the paper I wrote on rethinking the North End, which called for reviving this plan in that paper. But it was not until this hearing started and I started digging very deeply into the history of this plan and the planning processes surrounding it that made me convinced that it is actually still a legally binding planning document. And I think that's kind of like the overarching big picture of this appeal, because that was kind of really the significant difference between the sides and myself and staff regarding this Planning Commission process, was the question of whether this and the accompanying design guidelines for this plan are legally binding documents. So I'm going to focus on those big picture questions, because there, in my brief, there are some big picture questions and then some more, kind of smaller and technical violations I perceived during the hearing. So I have, and it's been mentioned, I put a lot of information into the record in this case, again, going back to the 1980s, and how this got developed, how it got adopted, the problems that were faced in implementing it. And I spent some time in my discussions below and in the record describing the adoption process in 1990. So the very last meeting of 1990. And what was going on was the city was going through a periodic review process at the same time it was developing this. In that periodic review process, and I go through that in detail in the record, they actually, the city commission in the year, I think it was earlier in the year 1990, they adopted a tourist commercial code by ordinance in which they specifically referenced the tourist commercial code being adopted to implement the end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan, even though this document had not been finished yet. Similarly, the City Commission adopted comprehensive plan policies as part of the periodic review process, which also state explicitly that they were adopted to implement the end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan. Then they adopted a urban renewal plan that they said was being adopted to implement this plan. On the final commission meeting of 1990, the terminology they used in this document was that they were accepting the plan as opposed to adopting the plan. I guess I use, Mr. Robinson's own words, depending on what, it doesn't really matter what the word was, whether it was accept or adopt. The fact is they were adopting the plan after all they'd had done with all of these other code and ordinance adoptions and urban renewal plan adoptions. And then during Mr. Fowler's mayoral tenure, the city expended very, very large sums of money and represented to parties that they had adopted a plan. They bought land for this end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan. So the term I use in the material I submitted to the Planning Commission is that in 1990 they had effectively adopted this document in 1990. They did not, as far as I can tell, also adopt the end of the Oregon Trail design guidelines that were published in 1991. But an interesting thing happened after Mayor Fowler left office. In 2000 or 2001, I believe, when the city was adopting the downtown community plan, and this would have been under Mayor Williams. Originally, in the early draft of the downtown community plan, this was pretty much going to be left out. However, I found minutes of a meeting where Dr. Porter of the End of the Oregon Trail Foundation, the predecessor to today's Clackamas Heritage Partners group, he actually lobbied for reinsertion of the planning process into the downtown community plan, and that was in fact done. And there was very explicit text in the downtown community plan that states that they are adopting the end of the 1991 end of the Oregon Trail design guidelines by reference. It's a very explicit language. And I submitted a case below that never got addressed by staff or the city attorney, kind of on the law of incorporation by reference. There's a case called Gonzalez versus Lane County, 24 Oruba 251, and it says that incorporation by reference is legally effective when the body doing the incorporating, A, identifies the incorporated document with specificity, which they did, especially with the date 1991, which is the date on the guidelines, and demonstrates an intent to incorporate the document. And that's demonstrated by the fact that those guidelines are mentioned in the appendix also, and also in one of the zones that were in the downtown community plan as well, which covered, the end of the Oregon Trail area. So it's my contention that, therefore, both this document and the downtown community plan and the end of the Oregon Trail design guidelines apply, and they are part of the plan. They aren't codes. The design guidelines were incorporated into the downtown plan. And there is a Supreme Court's case that says that the comprehensive plan controls the codes. So those design guidelines would therefore control any of the ordinances that are otherwise in the development code. And that's the kind of the big picture going on here, because those design guidelines have a height limitation of 2.5 stories. And this exceeds 2.5 stories. And because new development is supposed to be complementary with, and give people the sense, and there's a lot of discussion in this book for context about its intent to, when people arrive as tourists, to kind of like feel, in that North End area, like they're back in time, like it's, like a Williamsburg of the West, or, Plymouth Rock, or something like that. I'm really captivated by the idea of Oregon City with a historic downtown and the Willamette Falls Legacy Project on one side, and this magnificent, development on the other side of downtown. I think Oregon City would be like nowhere else on the planet. So in my view, the proposal doesn't comply with the guidelines for those two basic significant reasons of, in the guidelines, the 2.5 height limitation and the requirement for a wood exterior that would evoke, the era of the Oregon Trail. Now, to complement that, as further context, there's actually another code provision in here. Oh, God. Am I doing on time? Okay, that OCMC 1762050A3A would require this hotel, because it abuts the site of the Hackett House, to, quote, utilize materials and a design that incorporates the architecture of the subject building, i.e. the landmark, the Hackett House, as well as the surrounding district or abutting historic landmark. The landmark in this case is the Hackett House. Like the design guidelines require, this code, the result would be the same because the Hackett House has a wood exterior. So this code would require, a wood exterior as well. At one of the McLaughlin Neighborhoods Association meetings, I'm not entering it into the record or anything, but I showed some of the exterior wood drawings, the buildings that Mr. Hill has done magnificently.
We're not.
You're going to.
Then you can't talk about that.
Okay, I won't talk about that. I don't think that the hotel can exceed the 45-foot height limitation with an adjustment or a variance because the design guidelines control anything in the code. So it's the 2.5 height limitation that cannot be exceeded according to the incorporated design guidelines of the end of the trail master plan guidelines. So 3 minutes left. Okay, so some of the more less overarching issues with this appeal. Neighborhood Association, the requirement, when the applicant's representative went to the Two Rivers Neighborhood Association, they met with one person, and the code says you have to meet with an association, and it doesn't seem to me that meeting one person really satisfies either the spirit or the letter of 1750-055. And also they were required to give a certified mail letter to the chair of the CIC under 1750-055 subsection 4, and that was not done.
Can I ask you a
either.
question about that? Did you raise that issue at the Planning Commission about the CIC notice?
I think it was in our letter from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. Yeah, because that point was in there.
We'll have to check that.
Okay. Okay, design guidelines. Okay, and one of the major issues has to do with the bicycle connectivity. Under 12.04195, we have a block spacing standards that once every 550 feet, I believe, is reached, you have to have a bike lane or a bike access way. And the issue with this block is, well, a couple of things. The burden of proof being on the applicant, they didn't measure, in their drawings, they didn't measure the block. Their burden requires them to take all the measurements of the various blocks and lots on this site. They didn't do that with specificity to allow them to comply with this code and make all the calculations. But the block basically runs from 17th Street to OR 213, and then from Washington to Main Street. So as a block, it is just enormous. So there's no way that the spacing standards wouldn't apply to require a bicycle access lane on this development, and it's not provided. And finally, I want to talk about the letter from the tribes. What's been submitted by staff has email addresses that you cannot identify who the person is the email is being sent to. So it does not constitute evidence that the appropriate cultural officials at, several of these tribes have in fact been contacted.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Well, we have come to that time where the commission by policy is required to make a decision. So by policy, we do not meet past 10 o'clock without a unanimous vote of the commission to proceed, and we can only proceed for an additional hour after that. So the question is, in fact, can I pause the public record while we talk about this? So we're going to pause the hearing and have that discussion.
I would understand.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday, members of the commission. Mike Robinson on behalf of applicant. We would like to proceed, and I believe we can finish the applicant's presentation well before 11 o'clock. And our preference would be, if the commission feels like it can do so, for the commission to close the public hearing, close the record, and deliberate to a tentative decision tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Your pleasure.
I'm game if they are.
I am too.
I'd say let's continue and move on.
Well, let's hear a motion.
Move to proceed with the hearing.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm game.
Call a roll.
Commissioner Ide.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw.
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg.
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
I do want to say before, this is the first time in 3 years that we've ever had to invoke this particular thing. So normally we are able to proceed and deal with their business, and I'll vote aye and we'll move forward. So we'll hear from the, I'm getting confused now, applicant this time. So I'll reopen the public hearing.
Dan Fowler, here in Oregon City is our business. I'm going to go really fast because of time. Just as a reminder, we get involved in this a lot, but we're so excited about trying to bring a hotel to town. There's a lot of good reasons why we want to do this, and we've been working on it for almost 2 years between planning and going through the process, and it's a little bit sad that it gets boiled down to 15 minutes, but that's the way it is. We've had numerous staff meetings, pre-app. We've been to the Historic Review Board twice, one for design guidelines that they actually helped us. We actually asked their opinion on how the hotel should be and be formatted. Then we had 2 neighborhoods we went to. We didn't have to. We went to the McLaughlin neighborhood first, went to the Two Rivers neighborhood second. It was not our fault, I don't think, that one person showed up. We did the appropriate procedure. And then we had 3 different neighborhood McLaughlin meetings. We had 5 different planning commission meetings with the unanimous approval. And Mike Robinson is going to take it from there because this is more about the code than any of that.
Thank you, Dan. Mayor Holliday, members of the City Commission, Mike Robinson on behalf of the applicant. My mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon 97204. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I'll make the applicant's presentation tonight, but I want you to know we have 3 professionals here to answer your questions. Mike Ard, who is our traffic expert, Tom Sissel, who's our civil engineer, and of course Lloyd Hill, who did a great job on the architecture and the site plan. So let me start with a couple of overarching comments, and then let me emphasize how much we support the Planning Commission decision and the staff report before you. I think they did a very good job. So consequently, I'm probably not going to address each of the 15 issues. I'll probably limit it to the ones that Mr. Nocita raised. That may be really what you're interested in. But let me make a couple of points. I've already said we agree with the staff report to the City Commission. Carrie's already noted, or the Deputy City Attorney's already noted, that this is an on-the-record hearing limited to the issues preserved at the Planning Commission and raised in the appeal statement. I think it was a valid question she asked about the CIC issue. I don't recall the issue, but if Mr. Nocita said the M&A letter raised it, I'll accept that, and Deputy City Attorney can explain that. We'll explain as we go through this that I believe you can find, after you've listened to everyone who has something to say tonight, that the Planning Commission found that the applicant met its burden of proof by substantial evidence to demonstrate that the relevant approval criteria was satisfied. And ultimately, that's the legal standard that's before you. So let me also give you a couple of facts, and then I'll tell you what we'd like you to do. The site is not within an historic district. That's particularly relevant to one approval criterion. It's properly zoned for this use. There are 3 applications that comprise this application. We addressed all of the approval criteria. There were, I think, 5 hearings. There were certainly 4. And the Planning Commission did, I think, a very good, diligent job of examining the applicant's presentation and what issues were raised, and ultimately found in a 5-0 unanimous vote that the applicant had met its burden of proof. Also, the Historic Review Board and the board that works with the End of the Oregon Trail facility voted to support the application because, as the witnesses said, this is an important economic development tool, not just for downtown, but for the community as well. Evidence was in the record. This is your first new hotel since the Best Western was built in the 1960s. And if you look at the site plan Laura put up, you couldn't imagine a better location. Next to the train station, across from the End of the Oregon Trail Museum, anchoring downtown. It's the right use in the right location at the right time. Jack Hammond, who I have a great deal of respect for, testified twice and expressed the board's view that this was an appropriate location. And I don't know that I'll come back to this, so I want to be sure and say it. If you notice that hotel is perpendicular to Washington Street. They did that so that you could maintain the view from I-205 to the End of the Oregon Trail facility. And Jack Hammond expressly touched on that in his testimony. But even if, and unfortunately, the End of the Oregon Trail plan, which is a gorgeous document, is not a planning document. But it says in 2 places on page 81 and again on page 80 that the hotel ought to be oriented, or no, sorry, that you ought to have views of the End of the Oregon Trail facility from the highway. That's what this design does. So we hope at the end of this tonight, you'll make the decision tonight, close the record, close the public hearing, vote to affirm the Planning Commission decision, approve the applications, and reject the appeal. So let me then go into a couple of issues. Mr. Nocita first, in his appeal and tonight, cites OCMC 1762050A3A, and this is his site. I know I went through this fast. This is actually on page 9 of my September 11th letter. He cites it for the proposition that the architectural, and he used the word style, of the hotel must meet the Hackett House. He's wrong for 2 reasons. First, he didn't give you the entire citation. Let me read you what it says. Alterations, additions, and new construction located within the McLaughlin Conservation District, Kenema National Register District, and the Downtown District, and when abutting a designated historic landmark. So let me stop there. Yes, we abut the Hackett House, which is a designated historic landmark, but the site is not within one of those 3 districts. Therefore, this standard does not apply. We made that argument to the Planning Commission, and they found that we satisfied this standard for other reasons, but the plain language is it doesn't apply because the site is not within one of those 3 areas. But here's what it goes on to say. When abutting a designated historic landmark shall utilize materials in a design that incorporates the architecture, not architectural style. Mr. Nocita's appeal inserts a word, style, that's not found in the relevant code language. The architecture of the subject building as well as the surrounding district or abutting landmark. So his argument is, well, the building, Hackett House, is East Lake, therefore the hotel must incorporate those elements. That's not what it says. It doesn't say you have to follow a particular style. And moreover, if you're trying to match not only the historic building but the surrounding district, how could one style do it? It can't. But the fundamental issue is he misread the criterion. You have 2 elements, abutting an historic house and being in one of those 3 districts. We're not in one of those 3 districts. The standard does not apply. Let me talk then, he did not mention this, but I want to mention it. It's the idea, and I think it's his last appeal issue, that the Planning Commission erred by not granting his reconsideration. That issue was not, it's not in the Planning Commission record. And as your code 1750-290 says, this is an on-the-record appeal hearing. The Planning Commission made its decision on November 13th. He appeared ex parte before the Planning Commission on November 27th, 14 days after the decision was made, well after the record was closed. The only reason I knew about it is I happened to be there for another matter. That matter is not in front of you because it's not part of the record. Plus, either there was no final decision, so there's no appeal, or there was a final decision, and if that's the case, then he's far too late to appeal it, and he should have appealed it separately. But beyond that, if you look at the language, you have to go first to the planning director, who's required under this code provision to find that certain facts are met, and then appropriately so, the planning director gives notice to all the parties that it's going to be back in front of the Planning Commission for reconsideration. That did not happen. Mr. Nocita simply appeared ex parte in front of the Planning Commission because they are a nice bunch of people. They let him talk. But it did not follow the code provision, but more importantly, it's not something that's part of the record, and it's not a Planning Commission decision. Let me talk to you about the allegation that the city did not follow notice to the tribes. Bear with me just a minute. So, first of all, your code does not require that notice be given to certain individuals. What it says is notice has to be given to 5 designated tribes, and then they have 45 days to respond. This is we addressed this issue in the applicant's October 2nd letter at pages 4 and 5. The city, there's evidence in the record, and it's in my letter, it's exhibits 4 through 7 attached to that letter. The city gave email notice to each of the 5 tribes. Only one, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, responded within the requisite 45 days. There was no error. You don't have to give it. Your code does not require the director to give notice to individuals. It requires it to give notice to tribes. The evidence shows the email addresses of each of the tribes. One responded, and the city and the Planning Commission considered its response. So there's no issue. The neighborhood association letter.
One quick second, Mike.
I'm sorry.
So,
I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast. I apologize.
That's all right. You want to pause it for just 1 second, Katie? So I just want to ask you a quick question on that subject. Was that a single email to 5 addresses, or was it 5 individual emails?
The evidence shows it was 5 individual emails.
All right, thanks.
So that's what it appears to me. And go back, if you want to look at it, it's exhibits 4 through 7 to our October 2nd letter.
Okay.
Neighborhood association letter. First of all, whatever we did or didn't do wrong is harmless error, because your code does not say a failure to correctly comply with that standard is a jurisdictional defect. Unlike the failure, unlike other examples, and I'll use the appeal fee, if one doesn't pay an appeal fee, that's a jurisdictional defect. The code doesn't impose a jurisdictional defect language on this letter. In fact, the neighborhood association said you don't have to send it via certified mail, and the code says they can approve other communication means. That's what we did. The issue with the CIC letter, assuming it was preserved, there's no evidence in the record that that letter was provided. But again, it's harmless error. There's no jurisdictional defect. 3 neighborhood associations participated. 3. This was not a case where the citizens and the neighborhood associations that are recognized by the city weren't aware of this. So I don't think there was error with respect to the Two Rivers Neighborhood Association. Your code doesn't say that doesn't mandate how many people have to attend a meeting to make it a meeting. Sometimes you can't pull people out of their homes at night to get them to attend. And in this case, there was a meeting, the neighborhood association said you can use means other than a certified letter, and they did so. So let me talk about last the end of the Oregon Trail and the design guidelines. So first of all, talk about the design guidelines. Draft, that's what's in the record, draft. No city commission or city council I'm aware of adopts draft documents. That tells me it wasn't finished. And Mr. Nocita said as much with respect to the plan. He didn't say that about the design guidelines, but you can infer that. It's not finished, it's a draft. But even assuming that it was a final document, it is a design guideline that doesn't function if you follow its intent. I'm just going to read you a little bit from page 73. Quote, to fairly administer these guidelines, an End of Oregon Trail EOTG District Design Review Board will be appointed from a group of qualified professionals, end quote. And it goes on to say, all new development will be submitted to and approved by the board. Is there such a board? No. How could you carry out these design guidelines? Because the very things the design guidelines call for haven't been done. But more importantly, it's never been applied. Christina Robertson Gardner put an email into the record dated October 2nd, 2017. I commend this to you. She says at the end, quote, "It may be the 1991 end of the National Historic Oregon Trail Historic District Design Guidelines were created as part of that effort," referring to the things the city had done, "but there is no indication that these guidelines were ever adopted by the City Commission. In the 16 years I've been with the city, we have never reviewed an application for compliance with these 1991, and I'll add the word draft, design guidelines," end quote. So you have guidelines that were never adopted, that are draft, that have never been approved in the 24 years since. They are not standards. This is Mr. Nacita's, he referred to this in his testimony. This is in the record. This is his letter where he went back and researched the history. What it doesn't lack, what it doesn't have is any evidence that this city commission ever adopted the plan, which I acknowledge is a gorgeous document. It's not a planning document. Never adopted it, never went through the PAPA process. I appreciate the fact that he's using my argument about the fee guidelines, but the reality is there's this very specific process in Chapter 197 in the Administrative Rules for Post-Acknowledgement Plan Amendments. There's no evidence that this ever went through that process. I respect his ability as a researcher. Even he couldn't find any evidence that the City Commission ever adopted it. It is not a plan document. It's never been applied. It's not a relevant approval standard. And we have 4 or 5 letters we put into the record that explained, I went back and looked, each of the letter explained why that's not the case. I want to mention 2 cases very quickly. Baker v. City of Milwaukee, 1975 Oregon Supreme Court case. Yes, the plan controls over land use regulations where there's a conflict. There's no conflict where it's not adopted. The second case he cites is Gonzales v. Lane County, but he cites it for the wrong proposition. Gonzales v. Lane County holds that you can incorporate findings if you do certain things, not that you can incorporate adoption of documents by doing that. That is not the way it works. Cities that want to adopt land use regulations and plans have to go through the Chapter 197 post-acknowledgement plan adoption. There's no evidence in the record, and I think he searched mightily for it. There is none in the record that shows either of these documents were ever done. Based on everything the Planning Commission did, all of the evidence before you, your good staff report, and the findings the Planning Commission adopted, you can conclude that the Planning Commission did its job. This application meets the approval criteria. We ask you to reject the appeal and approve the applications, and we would ask you to close the record and do that tonight. Thank you for your time.
Okay, questions for Mr. Robinson? Anybody? I have a couple. So the appellant, right? Mr. Nacita asked, made a reference about the earlier language between resolution and regulation. And there is now this question about accepting versus adopting. And I would give this reference before I ask you the question. I've served in many capacities over many years and served on the budget committee at one point, and the budget committee accepts a budget but sends it to the city commission to adopt the budget. So there is an actual legal difference between those two words, isn't there? There may be,
but I think you'd have, may I go on?
Sure.
I think you'd have to find it would be relevant to the post-acknowledgement plan adoption process that 197, 610, and the subsequent provisions require for adoption of land use regulations and plans. And I am not aware of any authority, and Gonzales v. Lane County certainly doesn't stand for it, that a legislative body can, quote, accept the document into existence. That just does not exist in our land use process.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Nacita, do we have anybody that's, is public testimony come next?
Yes, and because we went through the first one, I don't know if there were.
There's 2
Okay,
remaining.
you got it. Never mind.
So let me get back on the floor so I can see what's going on here. So I have 2, Jerry Herman and Paul Edgar.
Yes, hello. My name is Jerry Herman. I'm a resident of Gladstone. I've been really involved in a lot of these areas that we're looking at, including the areas along Washington Street. The reason I'm here tonight is to talk about, in a simple memo coming around to you, some of the reasons I think this hotel needs to go forward, not just because it's an economic element, but because it could be a hub for the redevelopment of the North End District. The hotel design, not everybody's agreed with it, but I think the design was put in a manner could be adjusted, and I know the appellant was asked to be a part of that effort of looking at maybe some adjustments. He asked me to attend a meeting, which I did, with the architects to try to look at some things that could be done to make the hotel more
Can you pause
serviceable.
that for a second?
Excuse me?
So I got to ask you a question. This is new testimony.
I was intending to ask Mr. Herman whether or not it was.
Did you present this information at the Planning Commission?
Not what I just, yes, parts of that I did. The back drawings are there, and some of my commentary about how the hotel could serve as a hub for redevelopment.
Okay, well, beyond that, I can't take any more of your testimony.
So just to be clear, you're saying these two images are in the record?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and the,
Take the paragraphs one by one. Just say if they're either in the record or not. First one, hotel design.
Yes, I spoke to these issues in the record.
Second one, the hotel can serve as a hub.
Yep, talked about that it could be a redevelopment
Third one,
anchor
hotel
for future.
applicants wish to participate in blah, blah, blah.
Correct. That I, as one of the advocates of the hotel, wanted to participate with other groups to make improvements in and around the vicinity of the hotel. The hotel folks were willing to be partners with us on that. That's in the record.
and this was in written testimony that you submitted before the Planning Commission,
This is verbal and written both
okay?
at one of the planning commission meetings.
So next one.
Second or third.
Next one, citizen, including the appellant, wish to see the improvement made. Well, see, you can't do because
That I
you know there
can't
was an
say,
appeal.
you know. Let me just speak to the tone here, all right? The hotel, we feel, is something that can really help the redevelopment of the North End District. I want to call your attention basically to other anchors that have made a difference. Whether you like the Oregon City Shopping Center or not, 25 years ago that was built, and it's been a mainstay to that part of the city. Or the next major improvement was River Shore Hotel, which we see as a major asset to
Did
that.
you make these arguments at the Planning Commission? Did you
No, I
talk?
did not.
Then, I'm sorry, Jerry, you're done.
All right.
Okay? We have
Okay,
specific
here's
things
my-
we have to use, and if I let you do something, then, that presents all kinds of other things going forward in the process.
Fine.
So please
Here's
just.
my final bottom line. It would be desirable to a lot of people to see some type of compromise reached with the appellant in this city to allow this project to move forward. I'm done.
You're done.
Thank you.
Go sit down, please.
As for the materials that Mr. Herman submitted, I would say that I think that the first 3 bullet points, he says we're in, the hotel taxes, I don't think are in. So those last 2 arrows, wishing to have amicable solution that includes a hotel, I think is not a fact, and he's indicated that these last 2 images are in, so we will accept the record, not including the last 2 of the 5 arrows.
Can we have staff verify that in the record?
We can try right now.
Not right now, but I mean, if we make a tentative decision going forward, I just want to make sure that we verify
We will.
whatever's in this
We
so that
will.
it's not in the record if it's not supposed to be.
We will, and if we come back with the findings, we can.
Okay. I don't even want this thing. So, Mr. Edgar, I'm going to be very clear with you, okay? You can only talk about stuff that you talked about at the Planning Commission.
Or someone talked about.
Okay.
Okay? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Commissioners. I testified about the lack, in fact, total lack of historic design within this, with what's there. And because it does, if you take a look at the pictures, you take a look at the drawings and everything, there is,
in 1740 building guidelines and what we have in our city code, it talks about detracting. And this happens to be the exact case, and it's not like that I didn't talk directly to Dan Fowler about it at a meeting when I was there. But all I can say is that it does detract. It is not historically appropriate. You can look at it. There's nothing there. And all I appeal and have appealed to him, and I appealed at the time, we can do better. Something should be done better because we have this end of the Oregon Trail. We're trying to establish our reputation as a historic city, and they're to be putting a building up that absolutely detracts in a historic nature by design guidelines is inappropriate, and it violates our building guidelines in our own 1740 code. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to testify? Seeing none, the appellant has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, James Nasito, Oregon City. So the major point I'd like to make is that Mr. Robinson did not represent at all accurately to you what he submitted on October 2nd as far as the Native American recipients of a representative from Oregon City's inquiry regarding Native American consultation. I'm looking at Exhibit FF, and within Exhibit FF, I'm looking at PDF page 13 at the bottom where it says Exhibit 4, page 1 of 2. And there is an email, not 4 like Mr. Robinson represented. There is one email dated January 24th, 2017 at 2:13 p.m. There's a bunch of ink blocking and making it not entirely clear. It looks like from Diliana Vasileva of OrCity.org to the following email addresses. Some of them I can't read because they're not totally clear because of the pen markings. The first looks like thhpo@cwsb-something.org. Second is thpo@grandron.org. The third is Tiara Farrow at ctuir.org. The fourth is rkentta at ctsi.nsn.us. And the last one is Johnson at yakima.com. Now, you might be able to draw an inference that the one that says grandron.org is Grandron and the one from Yakima is Yakima. There's nothing in any of these email addresses, however, the other three, as to who they are or what their organization is. They could be some totally unrelated organization. And there's nothing in the record that any of these folks are the specific cultural resource representatives that the code requires that this email and these inquiries be sent to. I think the only other comment I'm going to make is about this, the height variance or adjustment and the much discussed rationale as to preserve a view corridor to 205. One of the problems that I see with that is this is a two-phase project. So they're touting the fact that there's going to be a view corridor when this hotel gets built perpendicularly to I-205. However, shortly after in phase 2, the mixed-use condo retail developments that are going to be constructed and built in phase 2 are going to precisely block that view corridor that is being so touted for phase 1. So that's my only comment. Oh, I will make one more comment about, since I have the time. I disagree with Mr. Robinson's construction of the code that requires that, I gotta find it now. Okay. The interpretation of 1762-050A3A. He suggests that a house has to be in the McLaughlin district and the Kenema district and the downtown Dallas.
He said it had to be in one of them.
No, that's, if you read the language of the code.
That's what he just testified to.
The language of the code as he has constructed it would have to have a house be in all three of those buildings simultaneously.
That's not what it says.
That's the literal interpretation of the code as Mr. Robinson has constructed it, and that's not possible.
You want to sit for a minute? Because I know I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So let's go back to your original testimony. You mentioned a land purchase during the time of the end of the Oregon Trail Center. What land purchase are you discussing there?
There were two, and they're in the record. I've placed them in the record.
Well, can you tell me?
The one was 1743 Washington Street, which is part of this development, and it was bought for what was called the Abernethy Road Connector.
Okay.
And there was another one, which was a house of a Mr.
Are you saying the city bought these?
Or the city bought 1743 Washington. The city, I think, also bought the house on Abernethy Road. And then the Urban Renewal Commission, basically, the Urban Renewal Commission bought what is now the Clackamas Landscape Supply for the end of the Oregon Trail project. And that's
Yeah,
in
I
this
don't think we
record,
can
too.
talk about that. Was that testified to in the record?
Yeah, I placed that in the record. That's in my history.
All right. So I just wanted to have that in my head.
At least three.
I'm curious because it's a pretty well established piece of law, not only common law but municipal law, that a past body, a past city commission, cannot bind a future city commission. So without some kind of actual adopted plans that have been codified somehow, how do you suggest that something that happened 28 years ago is relevant to the city commission today?
Could you specify what you're referring to?
I'm referring to the 91 design guidelines. I'm referring to the end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan. None of those documents were ever, adopted, made part of the rest of the city's stuff.
Well, I disagree because the end of the design guidelines were incorporated by reference to.
But they're clearly a draft.
I would like, well.
And more importantly, the question I ask, the question that is more concerning to me is that, and I talked about this my first term on the city commission, the city pays for plans. We spent $250,000 on a waterfront master plan back in the day when I was on the city commission. And, you look at it for a year or two, it goes on a shelf. I bet it's sitting on a shelf or in a box somewhere here right now. And if we look at what's going on in the waterfront right now, I guarantee you that it doesn't look anything like what that master plan says. So master plans are about vision and about, trying to make something happen. But anybody in the private sector knows that nothing like that happens until you have people with money who are willing to step up and make something happen. So, yeah, we put these plans out there to say, these are the kinds of things that we would really like to have, but they aren't cast in stone for 50 years. I don't understand.
Are you making a statement or are you asking me a question?
I guess I was just making a statement.
Okay. Thanks for clarification.
I guess that's all I have for you. Did anybody have a question for Mr. Nacia before we? All right, thank you, sir. I'm going to close the public record.
Because the applicant bears the burden of proof, we're going to let them have a 5-minute period of final rebuttal.
Oh, okay.
And they're also entitled to final written argument. They can waive that request, which I think they've intended that they're willing to do, but I want to make sure that on the record that they want to do that. So let's give it 5 minutes if we can.
Come on up.
Thank you, Mayor Holliday, members of the City Commission. Mike Robinson on behalf of the applicant. If the City Commission closes the hearing and record tonight, applicant will waive its rights to final written argument.
Okay.
So let me respond to Mr. Nacita's rebuttal issue. He's right. I was wrong. You asked me whether 5 individual emails had been sent or just one, and I said I thought it was 5 separate. What the planner's email shows, it was 1 to 5, the 5 tribal representatives. And as I said, we do have a letter from one of the tribes responding, so that's a pretty good inference it was going to the right folks. We also have Exhibit 7 to that October 2 letter, which is a September 29, 2017 memo from Mr. Walter to Chair McGriff and the Planning Commission, which describes that this is how they do it. So if that's the only issue on compliance, I don't think there's much there. The reality is they sent 5, Pete says they do it this way. We have the evidence of the email. We got a response from 1. Yeah, I don't think there's an issue there. That's my view anyway. The height adjustment to preserve the view corridor, if you go back and look at the site plan, phase 2 is not going to interfere with the view corridor. If it turns out it does, because we don't have a detailed development for phase 2 approved, then he can testify to that. The architectural style, so I'm not constructing the language, I'm merely reading it. And as I said before, and I apologize, this may sound like grinding the stone a bit, it doesn't contain the word style, and that was his word that he inserted into the language in his appeal. And it's very clear to me that the standard in 1762050A3A, even with my limited analytical skills, requires 2 sets of facts. You've got to be, the property that you're having alterations, additions, and new construction has to first be within 1 of 3 districts, and it's got to abut an historic district.
So it says 1 of 3 districts.
It says, it lists 3 districts. And yeah, maybe it should be or, but the intent is clear. We're not in a district, it doesn't apply. It doesn't matter whether we butt 1 or 1,000 historic structures. We're not in one of those districts. And lastly, the only thing I can say about the end of the Oregon Trail and design guidelines, if they'd ever been adopted, that'd be pretty good evidence and easy evidence to find. You got notice to DLCD, you got an ordinance. I ask you, is that in a record? No, it's not. And there's plenty of argument in the record about why the mere statement that these things are incorporated by reference don't make them mandatory approval criteria. But from not just a legal standpoint, but a common sense standpoint, as gorgeous as the end of the Oregon Trail Plan is, it's not a regulatory document. And as much as people may want design guidelines to implement that non-regulatory document, you don't do it with a draft guidelines that have never been adopted. There is nothing, in my view, that the City Commission has heard in this appeal that would require it to reverse the Planning Commission. We think you have plenty in the way of substantial evidence and findings done by a very diligent Planning Commission to affirm their decision, reject the appeal, and approve the applications, and that's what we would ask you to do, and we'd ask you to close the record in the hearing tonight. And thank you for your time.
So I'm going to ask you one question. The end of the Oregon Trail master plan is in the record, right? Can I ask a question about that?
Well, I'm sorry?
So the end of the Oregon Trail master plan is in the record.
Yes.
And if you could estimate, would you say how much of that actual plan has been constructed?
I have no way of knowing, Mayor.
Mr. Fowler? Come up here for a second.
Is that evidence in the record?
Well, the plan's in the record.
The plan's in the record.
Well, but it's, what he would say about it would be a fact.
And
That's not in the record.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Sorry. Was that all, Mayor?
That's it.
Okay, thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, now, close the record. Okay. And we'll have some deliberation, but I remind you guys, we've got 22 minutes.
Well, I'd like the opportunity to try to summarize it and bring some clarity to it.
Okay, go ahead.
So here's my summary. There are 2 applicable documents. The appellant has 15 points of contention, which he has filed. The response to that that's under consideration tonight is that given by the Planning Commission as enumerated by our own staff, which address those points one by one. In my view, the additional testimony tonight was explanatory, but not necessarily additional. And quite honestly, with all due respect to my friend Jerry Herman, I'm going to disregard that entirely because I don't care. Everything I need is in these documents. if I were to look at the contention, and I'm going to try not to do these 15 points one by one because, you know, we'd all like to go home some night, but I want to do justice to everybody. This reference to the Oregon Trail Master Plan and end of the Oregon Trail and these other criteria, they never were adopted. And you can tell that. You can look at the response that said that, and they weren't adopted by directly or incorporation, and they cannot be adopted by effective or constructive usage. So I look at that, and the appellant's arguments 4, 9, 10, and 11 hinge on that fact. I look at the communications with the neighborhood groups, and alternative communications are allowed. That discussion is in the planning group. It's an excellent summation. I look at any number of these points, and quite honestly, I feel like the Planning Commission answered them point by point. I find that there's no error in that their answers. I find they're justifiable and without prejudice, and I'm prepared to accept the Planning Commission's statement on its face.
Commissioner Shaw?
Well, I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell on his points there too, and I think mine is, I do, I'm in awe of Mr. Nacita's passion for the historic part of this city, and I would like to appreciate the Planning Commission's work and the staff for all the work they've had to do on this. I come from a point of more of the physical part, I guess, that we want a hotel there, and we see all the benefits of that, but it has to be financially feasible to do in Oregon City. And I asked the question early on to Mr. Hill when he did his first presentation probably years ago now, about any possibility of adding some kind of historic elements to this project, you know, and since that time, I've learned a lot. Just, you know, I'm a building designer, so I guess I'm qualified to kind of answer this a little bit, but when you build a hotel, you've got a certain price point you have to hit on your rooms. You know, Oregon City isn't going to support a $300 a night room. So that's where you start at when you figure out how much you're going to be able to afford to do this. So, and so what it comes down to, in order to get a structure built here that's financially stable and able to build and successfully, I think they've done the best job they can. And I say that because I understand the design guidelines, and we kind of have to do the best we can with those. And although it's not the best, and we hope that maybe other projects down there are going to be able to adopt those. But for this matter here, to have a successful hotel and stuff, I think that we have to kind of, waive the historic elements that we wished could have been on there. So, that's it.
Commissioner Megenberg?
I think the applicant has made an excellent case. What's compelling to me is that the development is not in the historic district, so therefore it wouldn't apply necessarily. Communities evolve over time. Architectural styles evolve over time. It's never set in stone. We certainly don't want to go back to the 1880s or whenever it was. I think the design is beautiful. I think I support the application.
Mr. Hyde?
I agree with all my colleagues here. I think, too, that it's the City Commission's job to ensure that the Planning Commission complied with all the city codes and other applicable laws and plans and regulations. And I find that the Planning Commission met all those requirements, and I support the denial of the appeal.
Okay, so I agree with all the points you guys made. I think we go down a dangerous road when someone makes a mission to kill a project just to kill a project. I believe that.
I won't challenge the mayor for bias on that. I can make a bias challenge.
Sir, can you sit down? You're out of order.
And I can challenge you for bias when I.
Sir, can you please sit down?
Challenge for personal bias.
Can you sit down, please? Thank you. The Planning Commission and the Historic Review Board both looked at this project for hours and hours and hours and hours on end. They asked good questions. The Historic Review Board asked good questions. The applicant made design changes to fix the problems with the Historic Review Board. The Planning Commission looked at this 4 or 5 times, and I'm sure that there were some changes and things that were made by the applicant through that process to gain the acceptance of the Planning Commission. As I've said on numerous occasions, I am extremely opposed to, not opposed is the wrong word, I'm strongly support the Planning Commission's decision 99% of the time. And I don't see any error that the Planning Commission made. I find none of the applicants or the appellant's arguments in any way persuasive. That's the correct word. I think that, well, I'll stop right there because Carrie's going to yell at me.
Before you move on, I want to ask you a question about this bias challenge.
Yes.
When you are going to vote today, are you going to vote based on the applicable approval criteria
Absolutely.
and the appeal issues as they relate to the applicable approval criteria?
Yes.
Okay.
So, before Carrie has to ask me another question, I will stop talking. I would be amenable to a motion at this point.
I think the motion is,
Don't you have it in the presentation somewhere?
Is it not to deny the appeal?
Well, let's get it
Third
right.
from the
So,
bottom.
yes. Tentatively, but it's not, I'm going to change the wording a little bit. Tentative denial of appeal 17006, thereby approving planning files CP 17002, DP 17003, and NR 17004 as approved, and making a tentative decision and returning on March 7th for the adoption of findings.
and the record's closed.
And the record's closed. Well, the record's closed now, and the record's going to be closed on March 7th. We're going to just come back for review to determine whether or not the findings are consistent with your decision.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Shaw, second by Commissioner Ide. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Where are we?
Consent agenda.
Anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. And we are on to
Communications. City manager.
communications. Is there anything that anybody has that is desperately important to be said tonight?
City manager?
I'll be very brief.
Okay.
Just that, just wanted to, there were a couple of updates, but I'll just focus on one right now. We have variable messaging signage up on 99E that ODOT will be starting the rockfall improvement project on 99E, so to expect delays along 99E between about 20-minute holds between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. So that project is about to kick off. That's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Anybody else? And we're adjourned.